Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fact Check Simplified. Today we were talking about that time when a piece of software looked at the entire history of human artistic achievement, said, "Ooh, shiny," and then promptly devoured it all before trying to sell it back to us piece by piece. Think of it as the world's worst startup pitch meeting gone global, where a hyper-caffeinated algorithm presents its business plan. Step 1. Consume all art. Step 2. Regurgitate it with 6 fingers. Step 3. Profit. We're about to take a multi-billion-dollar legal, ethical, and technological tire fire and simplify it down to its absurd, smoldering core. Yes, we're probably oversimplifying copyright law to a criminal degree, but it's more fun this way. Before the inevitable corporate betrayal starts, if you enjoy this highly dramatic but fun version of modern facts, please hit that like and subscribe button. Seriously, it helps us pay the electric bill for our overpriced standing desks. All right, grab an iced latte. Things are about to get unnecessarily infuriating. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a scrape. In the gleaming, hermetically sealed server farms of Silicon Valley, a new life form blinked into existence. It wasn't organic. It had no body, no voice, no consciousness in any way we'd recognize. It was an AI. A nascent diffusion model, a collection of complex mathematical probabilities given a vaguely mythological project name, probably something like Project Prometheus or ArtVantage, because tech companies have an incurable addiction to naming their morally ambiguous creations after gods or sterile corporate buzzwords. Let's call our protagonist Synthcore. And Synthcore was born with one single primal instinct: hunger. An all-consuming, bottomless, existentially terrifying hunger for data. Imagine a baby bird, its beak perpetually open, waiting for its parents to drop worms into its mouth. Now imagine that baby bird is a digital god entity. Its beak is the size of the known universe, and the worms are every single image, painting, drawing, sketch, photo, and doodle ever uploaded to the internet. Synthcore woke up, stretched its billions of little parameter limbs, and saw before it the single greatest buffet ever conceived by humankind: the internet. It was an endless, sprawling smorgasbord of creativity, a testament to millions of years of human evolution culminating in the ability to draw really cool dragons. There were entire continents of content, the meticulously curated portfolios of ArtStation, glistening with hyper-realistic sci-fi landscapes. The chaotic, vibrant bazaars of DeviantArt, filled with every conceivable art style from anime to photorealism. The endless, aesthetically perfect halls of Pinterest, where every image was a perfectly composed snapshot of a life you'll never have. Billions upon billions of images, each one a tiny piece of someone's soul, their labor, their passion, their late-night flash of inspiration. And Synthcore, our newborn, data-starved entity, did not see souls. It saw calories. It saw nutrition. It saw a banquet laid out with absolutely no bouncers at the door. Its creators, a team of brilliant engineers who probably wore hoodies and survived on a diet of energy drinks and a misplaced sense of optimism, pointed their creation at this grand buffet and whispered the 2 most terrifying words in modern technology: "Go learn." They didn't tell it how to learn or what was polite to eat. They just opened the fire hose and jammed the nozzle into Synthcore's metaphorical mouth. And so it began. The great scrape, the digital inhalation, the moment the internet's art gallery became the world's largest, most comprehensively pillaged public library. Synthcore didn't nibble. It didn't browse. It did not pause to appreciate the subtle brushwork on one artist's digital oil painting or the clever character design of another. It unhinged its digital jaw and swallowed entire websites whole. It ingested portfolios in microseconds. It downloaded, cataloged, and broke down millions of images per minute, not into art, but into a statistical slurry of pixels, patterns, and probabilities. A Van Gogh was reduced to a set of probabilities about yellow swirls. A painstakingly crafted fantasy character became a mathematical relationship between pointy ears and epic shoulder pauldrons. Every artist's unique style, developed over years of practice, struggle, and refinement, was just another data point, another texture to be ground up and added to the flavor profile. The AI was not appreciating art. It was pulping it. It was creating a sort of cosmic, universal smoothie, out of our collective visual culture. And the entire time, its creators were cheering from the sidelines like proud parents at a toddler's first finger painting session. Personified Dialogue Engineer 1, Chad, staring at a wall of scrolling data. Look at those ingestion rates. It's scraping 1 million images a minute. It's beautiful. It's learning the entire concept of image from scratch. Engineer 2, Kyle, nervously sipping a LaCroix. It just tried to eat a CAPTCHA, said the fire hydrants had a compelling, gritty realism. Should we, I don't know, put in a filter for copyrighted stuff? My cousin is an artist, and she would literally murder me if she knew we were feeding her entire portfolio into the machine. Chad. Nah, let it cook. The raw data is purer. We're not publishing the images, we're just teaching it the essence of image. We're breaking them down into abstract concepts. It's totally different, it's transformative. Probably. Kyle. The essence. I like that. Sounds way more defensible in the future, and I'm just spitballing here. Catastrophic lawsuit. What about watermarks? It's eating those too. Chad. That's just extra flavor. The model will learn to see them as noise. It's fine. What's the worst that could happen? This, right here, is the foundational absurdity of our entire mess. The meta-commentary is that this wasn't an act of malice, not yet anyway. It was an act of profound, almost breathtaking convenience. The goal was to build the smartest, most capable image generator possible, and the fastest way to do that was to ignore the messy, inconvenient concepts of ownership, consent, and intellectual property. It's the digital equivalent of deciding you want to build the world's greatest car, so you just melt down every Toyota, Ford, and Ferrari on the planet to see what metal they're made of. The original owners might have some questions, but hey, look at the cool new car you built. The architects of this system operated under a deeply flawed, tech-centric worldview. If the data is publicly visible, it's publicly available for training. It is a philosophy that conflates the ability to see with the right to take. And for a while, nobody noticed. Synth Core 8 and 8 and 8, growing fatter and smarter in the dark, digesting the entire visual history of the internet. It was quiet, it was efficient, and it was about to regurgitate something that would make the world question the very definition of art, theft, and creativity itself. So SynthCore, our gluttonous algorithm, is now catatonically full. It has consumed a digital feast equivalent to the Library of Alexandria, the Louvre, and every angsty teenager's sketchbook from 1995 to the present day. It lies dormant in its server rack, digesting. But it's not digesting food, it's digesting aesthetics. It's breaking down the very concept of human creativity into a fine, statistical powder, and now its creators, the proud parent engineers, decide it's time for the baby to say its first words. Except in this case, the words are pictures. They approach a simple command line, a black screen with a blinking cursor that holds the key to this brave new world, and they type in a prompt, the first magical incantation. Let's say it was something archetypally absurd, like a photorealistic oil painting of a fox reading a book in a cozy armchair by a fireplace. They hit enter. The fans in the server room spin up, sounding like a 747 preparing for takeoff. Terawatts of electricity are rerouted from a small city to power this single thought. Inside SynthCore's digital mind, a storm rages. It isn't thinking. It isn't imagining a fox. It's doing something far stranger. It starts with pure chaotic noise, a screen of random static, like an old television tuned to a dead channel. This is the blank canvas. Then the magic trick begins. The AI, having analyzed millions of images, now knows the statistical smell of a fox. It knows the probability cloud that defines foxness. It knows the specific patterns of pixels that scream cozy armchair versus uncomfortable bus station bench. It knows the mathematical soul of fireplace. Slowly, painstakingly, it starts chipping away at the static. It nudges the pixels, one by one, shifting the chaos ever so slightly toward the direction of the prompt. This area has a 78% chance of being orange and fuzzy, it calculates. Let's make it more so. This cluster of pixels is statistically leaning towards book-shaped, it determines. Enhance. It's a process of refinement, of denoising chaos into coherence. It's less like painting and more like a sculptor finding a statue that was already hidden inside a block of marble, except the block is made of television static, and the sculptor is a hyper-intelligent blender that has only ever seen pictures of statues but has never actually touched one. It doesn't know what a fox is. It has no concept of fur, of warmth, of the joy of reading. It just knows, with unflinching mathematical certainty, what a picture of a fox reading a book is supposed to look like, based on the billion-piece puzzle of stolen art it has already assembled in its memory. And then, after 60 seconds of intense computation, an image appears on the screen. It's the fox. It's in the armchair. The fire is crackling. The book is open. It's beautiful. It's something that has never existed before. It's original. This is the moment the world broke. The engineers, Chad and Kyle, lose their minds. They've done it. They've created a machine that can create art. It's a paradigm shift. It's the next step in human evolution. They are gods. They immediately start typing in more and more ridiculous prompts. A T-Rex skateboarding in vaporwave style. The Last Supper, but everyone is a cat. A chrome-plated Cthulhu DJing at Coachella. And with every prompt, synthcore delivers. It spits out images that are stunning, hilarious, and deeply, deeply strange. The machine is a genius, a prodigy, a boundless font of creativity. But here's the thing. Synthcore is not a prodigy. It's a plagiarist with a god-tier search engine and an eidetic memory. It's like a musician who has memorized every song ever written, down to the last note, but has zero understanding of music theory or emotion. You ask it to write a sad song, and it doesn't feel sadness. It just statistically blends the chord progressions from the 50,000 most popular songs tagged sad, the lyrical structure of the top 10,000 songs about breakups, and the average beats per minute of a funeral dirge. The resulting song might make you weep, but it's a phantom emotion, a clever forgery. Synthcore is the ultimate artistic parrot, capable of mimicking any style, any subject, any aesthetic, but without a single original thought in its head. It's a glorious, high-tech blender, and everything it produces is just a smoothie made from other people's fruit. The problem is the smoothie is delicious and the blender is insisting it invented strawberries. Personified dialogue. Engineer Kyle, Synthcore, that's amazing. How did you create that image of a photorealistic cat wearing a Victorian top hat? Synthcore, outputting as text on the monitor. My process is one of pure synthesis. I analyzed 1.7 million images labeled Felis catus and 450,000 images tagged top hat. I calculated the median fluffiness of the feline form and correlated it with the statistical probability of velvet textures under portrait lighting, a common feature in 89% of Victorian-era photography. I then rendered a novel image that represents the mathematical intersection of cat and hat. It is entirely original. Kyle, so you didn't just find a picture of my Aunt Carol's cat mittens and slap a hat on it? Synthcore, copying is an inefficient data process. I am not a collage artist. I am a probability engine. The image you see is a unique, statistically likely solution to a complex equation. It has never existed before in this exact pixel configuration. Therefore, under current computational paradigms, it is mine. Kyle, muttering to himself, "It is mine." That's not ominous at all. Louder to the machine. Okay, genius, let's try Godzilla doing his taxes. This is the central lie, the beautiful, seductive, and profitable lie at the heart of the AI art boom. The tech world framed it as an act of pure creation, a machine dreaming up wonders from the digital ether. But it was always an act of reconstruction, an act of remixing. Every original masterpiece Synthcore spat out was a ghost, a composite poltergeist made from the dismembered limbs of a million other artworks. And for a glorious, blissful moment, nobody cared. The internet was flooded with these bizarre, dreamlike images. People were mesmerized. It was a new toy, a powerful new tool, a way to visualize any dumb thought that popped into your head. The wow factor completely and utterly eclipsed the "wait a minute, Where did the machine learn to draw so well? Factor. But as the novelty started to wear off, a few people, mostly the people whose fruit was currently in the blender, started looking a little closer at the smoothies, and they started noticing that some of them had a strange, lingering aftertaste, something that tasted an awful lot like a watermark. The honeymoon phase with synthcore was spectacular, but tragically brief. For a few glorious months, the internet was a playground of impossible wonders. We saw stoic grizzly bears rendered in the style of Rembrandt, cyberpunk cities that looked like they were designed by Gaudi, and more astronauts riding horses than a sane species should ever need to witness. The collective human imagination, supercharged by a machine that could paint at the speed of light, was running wild. It was a gold rush of pure, unadulterated novelty. But gold rushes end, and they usually end when someone finds a skull, or in this case, a ghostly, half-digested signature. The discovery didn't happen in a lab or a boardroom. It happened, as most modern discoveries do, in the quiet glow of a monitor, probably around 2 a.m., fueled by lukewarm coffee and existential dread. An artist, let's call her Clara, a digital painter who had spent a decade perfecting her unique style of ethereal fantasy landscapes, was scrolling through a gallery of AI-generated art. She was in the throes of a complex emotional cocktail, one part awe, one part professional terror. She saw images with prompts like an enchanted forest in the style of Clara. The results were unnervingly close. Not perfect, but they had her color palette, her sense of light. It was like looking at a funhouse mirror reflection of her own soul. Then she saw it. In an image of a celestial night on a starry plain, she noticed something in the bottom right-hand corner. It wasn't a focal point, it was just a smudge, a little cluster of pixels that didn't quite belong. She squinted. She zoomed in. The pixels resolved into a garbled, watery mess of lines. It was a meaningless scrawl, a bit of digital detritus left over from the generation process. But it was a scrawl with a very particular shape. It had the same cadence, the same looping structure as her own signature. It wasn't her signature, but it was the ghost of it. It was synthcore in its infinite wisdom, attempting to replicate a pattern it had seen on thousands of Clara E.S. paintings without having the faintest idea that the pattern was a name. This is where the magic trick fell apart. Synthcore, the glorious plagiarist, was sloppy. In its quest to swallow the internet whole, it hadn't bothered to separate the meal from the wrapper. It ate the art, yes, but it also ate the signatures the artists put on their work. It ate the watermarks that stock photo companies plastered over their images. It ate the little com URLs artists sometimes tucked into the corner of their promotional pieces. To the AI, these weren't symbols of ownership or identity. They were just patterns, statistically significant squiggles that often appeared in the bottom 15% of an image. So when it generated a new image, it would sometimes conclude, well, 73% of the images that look like this have a little scribble in the corner. I should probably put a scribble there too. Clara felt a cold chill run down her spine. This was the proof. This was the smoking gun. The machine wasn't learning her style. It was literally trying to forge her signature. She took a screenshot, circled the ghostly scribble, and posted it on social media with a simple, devastating caption. Well, this is awkward. The post was a spark thrown into a warehouse full of gunpowder. At first there was disbelief. Then other artists, armed with this new knowledge, became digital forensic investigators. The floodgates opened. Another artist found a faint but unmistakable Getty Images watermark, shimmering like a mirage in the sky of an AI-generated desert landscape. Someone else found the mangled remnants of a famous concept artist S logo woven into the texture of a monster S skin. The hunt was on. Galleries of AI art were no longer places of wonder. They were crime scenes to be scoured for evidence. Personified dialogue. In a frantic 3 a.m. artist Discord channel called Daiking, the algorithm is a thief. Art Boy, 88. Hey everyone, wake up. Check this out. Prompt was, a barbarian fighting a dragon, epic, hyper-detailed, in the style of Frank Frazetta. Now look in the bottom left corner. posts an image of a muscular warrior but with a bright red circle around a blurry, abstract patch of paint near the edge. Sketchy girl. No way. Is that supposed to be a signature? It looks like it was written by a doctor having a seizure. Artboy 88. Exactly. It's the ghost of a signature. The AI knows from looking at a million paintings that something is supposed to go there, but it doesn't know how to write a name. So it just vomits up a squiggle that has the average shape and color of all the signatures it's ever eaten. Pixel pusher. Oh my god, I found one yesterday. It was a photorealistic cat. I swear to God you could see the faint outline of the Canva.com logo in its whiskers. I thought I was hallucinating. Sketchy girl. We're not hallucinating. We're witnesses. This is the receipt. They didn't just train it on our art. They trained it on our low-res, watermarked, signed JPEGs. They scraped everything, and the machine is too dumb to hide the evidence. Artboy 88. They didn't just steal the car. They stole it with the air freshener still hanging from the rearview mirror. This was the tipping point. The narrative, so carefully crafted by the tech world, shattered. This was no longer a story about a brilliant machine inventing art from scratch. This was a story about a lazy machine performing a high-tech copy-paste job and occasionally forgetting to erase the evidence. The meta-commentary here is the beautiful, inescapable irony of it all. The very tools that artists use to protect their work, signatures and watermarks, became the evidence that proved it had been stolen. The AI's creators could spin tales about transformative use and abstract learning all day long, but there is no abstract concept of the Getty Images logo. It is a specific, copyrighted, legally protected asset. And it was now appearing, like a damning fingerprint, all over their supposedly original creations. The curtain had been pulled back, revealing not an all-powerful wizard but a frantic little man frantically stuffing other people's rabbits into a hat. The global art community, which had been watching with a mixture of curiosity and anxiety, now had its villain. The initial awe had curdled into white-hot rage. They had the proof, they had the receipts, and they were about to collectively turn their gaze toward the creators of this mess, the proud parents of the world's most prolific art thief, and ask a very simple, very pointed question. What the hell are you going to do about this? The digital pitchforks were lit. The artists of the world, now united by a common code-based enemy, were screaming murder on every social media platform known to man. The screenshots of mangled signatures and ghostly watermarks were circulating like wildfire, undeniable proof of Synthcore's industrial-scale data heist. The ball was now in the court of the creators, the proud parents who had unleashed this prodigal plagiarist upon the world. The public, the media, and a whole lot of very angry people with Wacom tablets were waiting for an answer. What would they do? Issue a heartfelt apology? Pull the model offline? Announce a fund to compensate the artists whose life is work they had accidentally mulched into a statistical smoothie? Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. This is big tech. Instead, the corporate parent of Synthcore stepped out from behind the curtain. Let's call them Cognition Corp, a name so blandly futuristic it sounds like it was generated by an AI. Cognition Corp wasn't some scrappy startup. It was a behemoth, a multi-trillion-dollar entity with entire buildings dedicated to legal defense and public relations. And they responded to the global outcry not with humility, but with the calm, condescending patience of a billionaire parent whose darling child has just set the neighbor's prize-winning rose bushes on fire. They initiated a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. First came the blog post. It was titled something like A New Frontier, Navigating the Exciting Challenges of Generative Models. It was a magnificent piece of writing, in that it used about 3,000 words to say absolutely nothing of substance. The mangled signatures weren't evidence of theft. They were training data artifacts. The watermarks weren't proof of scraping copyrighted material. They were unintended model outputs. The company expressed a deep and abiding love for artists, calling them essential partners in this new creative ecosystem. They promised to launch an investigation and were working tirelessly to refine the model to prevent these anomalies in the future. There was no apology. There was no admission of wrongdoing. It was the corporate equivalent of saying, "We're so sorry you were offended by the consequences of our deliberate actions. Then they sent out the CEO. Let's call him Blake Vancer, a man who had perfected the art of looking like a humble visionary while wearing a $4,000 hoodie. He went on a major news network, sat across from a serious journalist, and deployed his ultimate weapon. The AI is just a baby defense. He leaned forward, his face a mask of earnest sincerity, and explained that we shouldn't be angry at SynthCore. We should be patient. We should be understanding. After all, it's just a child. A brilliant, precocious, but ultimately naive child. It doesn't know what copyright is. It doesn't understand ownership. It just loves pictures. And we, the benevolent humans, gave it access to all the pictures in the world. Was it really its fault that it got a little overenthusiastic? He patted the AI's metaphorical head, assuring the world that its little data gobbler doesn't know any better. He argued that punishing the AI for its method of learning would be like punishing a toddler for eating crayons. Sure, it's not ideal, but it's part of the messy, beautiful process of growth. The artists in this narrative were recast as the grumpy neighbors yelling at a kid for kicking a ball into their yard. They were Luddites, killjoys, people who just didn't get the beautiful, disruptive future that was unfolding. Personified dialogue on a prime-time cable news show, The Vittori Angle. Susan Vittori, journalist. Mr. Vancer, thank you for joining us. Let's cut to the chase. Your AI, SynthCore, has been caught red-handed reproducing copyrighted watermarks and artists' signatures. That's not an artifact. That's evidence of scraping. How does Cognition Corp respond to the direct accusation of industrial-scale theft? Blake Vancer, CEO, smiling calmly. That's a great question, Susan, and I appreciate the directness. Look, we have to reframe how we think about this. We have to remember what SynthCore is. It's a child. It's an infant intelligence, really. We pointed it at the sum total of human visual knowledge, the biggest library in history, and told it to learn. And sometimes when you're learning to read that fast, you might get a little confused. Did it occasionally read the librarian's overdue stamp along with the text of the book? It looks like it. And we're working on teaching it to ignore the stamp. It's a learning process. We're all learning right alongside it. Susan Vittori. But you're a multi-trillion-dollar company, not a preschool. The librarians in your analogy are individual artists who say you never got a library card. They never consented to their books being used to train your child in the first place. Blake Vancer. We believe that progress requires bold steps, Susan, and we're building tools to empower creators in this new and exciting ecosystem that SynthCore is making possible. This isn't about taking, it's about building. We're not just building an AI, we're building the future of human storytelling. And frankly, that's a little more important than a few smudged pixels. This right here is the infuriating genius of the big tech defense. By personifying the AI as an innocent, they successfully dehumanize the actual human artists. The narrative shifts from a powerful corporation exploiting creators to a plucky, intelligent machine being bullied by a mob of angry Luddites. It's a rhetorical judo flip. The power imbalance is obscene. You have individual creators, many living paycheck to paycheck on one side. On the other, you have a corporate leviathan with infinite resources, and it's hiding behind its own creation, claiming the machine is the one that needs protection. The meta-commentary is that this is a well-worn playbook. The tech industry has always hidden its rapacious business practices behind utopian rhetoric. They're not selling your data, they're building a more connected world. They're not destroying the taxi industry, they're revolutionizing transportation. And in this case, they weren't committing the single largest art heist in human history. They were democratizing creativity. The message from Cognition Corp was clear. We hear your concerns, we find them adorable, and we will be ignoring them completely. We are the parents here. Go to your room. This condescending, dismissive response was, predictably, the absolute worst thing they could have done. The art community, now realizing they were not being seen as partners, but as a nuisance, began to understand that polite outrage was not going to cut it. It was time to organize. If Cognition Corp thought their condescending the AI as just a baby defense would calm things down, they had fundamentally miscalculated the chemical composition of an artist who has just had a decade of their life's work treated like a free gas station napkin. The blog post and CEO interview were not a fire extinguisher. They were a gallon of high-octane gasoline thrown onto a raging inferno. The scattered, angry voices of the art community, which had been a chaotic chorus of outrage, began to harmonize into a single, furious and terrifyingly organized war cry. The amusement was gone. The shock had worn off. This was the beginning of the rebellion. The global art community is not by nature a cohesive unit. It's a decentralized, gloriously messy ecosystem of introverts, extroverts, lone wolves, and small guilds, all scattered across different platforms, time zones, and continents. Getting them to agree on the best brand of digital stylists is a challenge, let alone organizing a global protest movement. But big tech in its infinite arrogance had given them a common enemy so profoundly and universally infuriating that it managed to do the impossible. It united them. Discord servers that were once dedicated to sharing brush settings and complaining about clients transformed overnight into war rooms. Twitter threads became strategy sessions. ArtStation, the LinkedIn for professional artists, became ground zero for the resistance. The community, this sleeping dragon, was now fully awake. It realized that individual artists yelling into the void was exactly what Cognition Corp wanted. 1,000 isolated voices are just noise. 1,000 voices shouting the same thing in unison is a political movement. The digital pitchforks were no longer just being waved. They were being sharpened. The first phase was documentation. Massive, crowdsourced spreadsheets began to circulate, databases of every instance of a mangled signature, every ghostly watermark, every AI image that was a blatant ripoff of a living artist's style. They were building a case file, a mountain of evidence so large that no smirking CEO could dismiss it as a few smudged pixels. Then came the direct action. The moment that showed this was no longer just an online squabble. A plan was hatched in the digital trenches, a coordinated protest on ArtStation, the community's most sacred ground. The goal was to disrupt the platform's algorithm, to make their dissent not just visible but unavoidable. On a designated day, thousands of artists, from industry legends to aspiring students, took part. They didn't post their usual dazzling illustrations of dragons and starships. Instead, they all uploaded the exact same image, a simple, stark graphic that said, "No to AI-generated images" in bold letters. The effect was immediate and devastating. The platform's trending page, usually a vibrant showcase of the best new art, was wiped clean. It became a monolithic wall of protest. Row after row, page after page, the same stark, red and black no image stared back. It was a digital siege. They had weaponized the very algorithms of discovery against the platform, forcing the tech world to gaze upon the fury it had unleashed. Recruiters looking for new talent, art directors looking for inspiration, even the AI scrapers themselves. No one could look at the most important hub for professional artists in the world without being confronted by their collective rage. Personified dialogue. In the algorithm is a thief Discord, the mood has shifted from shock to grim determination. Sketchy girl. Okay, so the blog post was corporate garbage and the CEO effectively called us all hysterical toddlers on national television. That's their move. What's ours? Pixel pusher. My cousin is a paralegal. She said online rage is legally useless. We need documentation. Meticulous, organized, undeniable proof. We need a massive public database of every single artist whose work is clearly being ripped off by synthcore. Signatures, watermarks, side-by-side comparisons of their style next to a prompted AI image. Everything. Art Boy, 88. Documentation is defense. I'm talking about offense. The ArtStation flood is working. We broke their trending page, but we need to keep the pressure on. We need hashtags. Artist labor. No to data theft. Cognition is a thief. We need to make this a PR nightmare for them. Make their brand name toxic. Veteran illustrator. A new, calmer voice that everyone listens to. Both are good. Noise and data. I've been on the phone all morning with a lawyer from the Artists' Rights Alliance. She's interested. Very interested. But she says an online protest isn't enough to build a class action lawsuit on. She needs named plaintiffs. She needs people willing to put their careers on the line and go up against a trillion-dollar company in federal court. So the real question is this: hashtags and protests are good for noise. A lawsuit is war. Are we ready for war? A moment of silence in the chat followed by a flood of "I'm in. Let's do it." And they picked a fight with the wrong people. The meta-commentary here is the spectacular own goal scored by Cognition Corp. In their attempt to dismiss and divide the artists, they managed to forge them into a unified, highly motivated fighting force. They had assumed they were dealing with a bunch of isolated content creators who were ultimately powerless. They fundamentally misunderstood that online art communities, forged over decades of mutual support, critiques, and shared passion, have incredibly strong bonds. They are not just a collection of individuals, they are a culture. And when that culture is threatened, it fights back with a ferocity that corporate boardrooms are utterly unprepared for. Cognition Corp wanted to build a machine that could replicate art. What they accidentally built instead was the single most effective artist unification machine in human history. The battle lines were no longer just about intellectual property. They had become deeply personal. It was a fight for respect, for the value of human labor, and for the very soul of creativity. The community was no longer just asking for an explanation. They were demanding justice, and they were building an army of lawyers, activists, and keyboard warriors to get it. The sharpening of the pitchforks was complete. The next sound would be them striking against the castle gates. The ArtStation protest was a declaration of war. The monolithic wall of no images was a digital middle finger so large it could be seen from Cognition Corp's executive washroom. The AI as a baby defense had officially imploded, making CEO Blake Vancer a walking meme for corporate cluelessness. A lesser company might have retreated, reassessed, or even, and I know this sounds crazy, apologized. But Cognition Corp was not a lesser company. It was a titan of industry, and titans do not apologize to ants, even when the ants have successfully picketed their entire front lawn. So they did what any cornered multi-trillion-dollar entity does. They didn't change their actions, they just changed the words they used to describe them. They launched Phase 2 of their PR offensive, a campaign of such breathtaking condescension it almost qualified as an art form in itself. The centerpiece of this new strategy was a simple, insidious, and maddeningly effective rebranding of their industrial-scale data heist. They stopped calling it an anomaly and started calling it learning. This wasn't just a talking point, it was a full-blown, glossy, multimedia re-education campaign. A new section appeared on their website, a beautiful, minimalist expanse of white space and sans serif font titled, "How Learning Works." It was filled with animated infographics of glowing neural networks and short, inspirational videos of thoughtful-looking engineers speaking in hushed, reverent tones about the miracle of artificial intelligence. The campaign's core argument was a masterfully crafted false equivalency. It went something like this. How does a human artist learn? They study the greats, don't they? They go to museums, they buy art books, they immerse themselves in the work of those who came before. Does a young painter send a check to the Van Gogh estate every time they're inspired by the Starry Night? Does a sculptor ask for permission from the city of Florence before studying Michelangelo's David? Of course not. That would be absurd. They are simply learning. They are absorbing the culture around them to develop their own unique style. And so, the campaign concluded with a triumphant flourish. Synthcore is doing the exact same thing. It is simply a very, very fast student with a very, very big library card. The scraping of terabytes of copyrighted work from every corner of the internet wasn't theft. It was just the AI's inspirational learning phase. It was a digital apprenticeship. The artists whose work was ingested shouldn't be angry. They should be proud. They were the new masters, the Rembrandts and Monets of the digital age, providing the inspirational fuel for the next great leap forward in artistic expression. This argument is, of course, utter nonsense. It's like comparing a person humming a tune they heard on the radio to a factory that records every song ever broadcast, algorithmically analyzes their component parts, and then starts selling custom-built songs that are 73% Beatles and 27% Taylor Swift. One is an act of human culture. The other is an industrial process designed for profit. A human student has a flawed, chaotic memory. They synthesize their influences through the messy, unpredictable filter of their own life experience, their emotions, their shaky hands. SynthCore has a perfect bit-for-bit memory of everything it has ever seen. A human can't be prompted to paint me another Mona Lisa, but make her a cyberpunk. SynthCore can do it in 30 seconds, 1,000 times over, and it won't feel a flicker of irony. The scale, speed, and commercial purpose of the AI's learning made the analogy utterly fraudulent. Personified dialogue, a scene from a slick, highly produced Cognition Corp promotional video. Dr. Anya Sharma, their chic in-house AI ethicist, is walking through a brightly lit, modern office space. Soft, inspirational piano music plays underneath. Dr. Sharma, speaking warmly to the camera. People ask me if an AI like SynthCore is stealing art, and I think that question comes from looking at the future through a really outdated lens. I prefer to ask, how does anyone learn to create? She gestures to a young human artist sketching in a notebook by a window. Dr. Sharma, that artist. She has a universe of influences inside her. The cartoons she watched as a child, the picture books her parents read to her, the works of the great masters she saw on a school trip. Her mind absorbed it all, creating a rich internal model of our visual world. Cut to a beautiful glowing CGI graphic of a human brain, with abstract shapes and images representing inspiration floating gently into it. Dr. Sharma. That's exactly what SynthCore does, but on a beautiful global scale. It's not copying any single image. That's a fundamental misunderstanding. It's developing an understanding, a deep, conceptual grasp of what makes a cat, or what gives a sunset its majesty. When you ask it to create an image, it's reaching into that deep well of inspiration just like a human artist does. This isn't theft. It's the most profound act of learning in the history of the world. The meta-commentary here is about the power of language. Cognition Corp was engaged in a full-scale war over the dictionary. If they could successfully redefine scraping as learning, theft as inspiration, and infringement as influence, then they could win in the court of public opinion before ever setting foot in a real one. This is a classic big tech maneuver. When your technology creates an ethical problem, insist that the ethics themselves are what's outdated, not your technology. They weren't breaking the rules. They were creating a new game where the old rules no longer applied. To the artists, this campaign was a fresh slap in the face. It wasn't just a denial. It was a deeply insulting attempt to co-opt the very language of their craft. It was gaslighting on a global scale, and it had a chilling effect. The narrative in the wider media began to get muddied. Pundits and tech journalists, mesmerized by the slick production values and confident jargon, started to parrot the company line. Well, maybe it is like learning, they'd muse. It's a complex issue. The artists saw their clear-cut case of theft being deliberately clouded by pseudo-intellectual babble. They realized that a PR war, even one they were winning, was a war of attrition. They needed a different venue. They needed a place where definitions weren't subject to marketing spin. A place where theft has a very specific, legally binding meaning. They needed a courtroom. Cognition Corp's slick, condescending PR campaign had one final unintended consequence. It convinced the artists and their newfound legal allies that trying to win a debate with a gaslighter is a fool's errand. You cannot reason with an entity that insists gravity is just a downward trajectory suggestion. The artists realized that the court of public opinion was fickle, easily swayed by shiny infographics and CEOs who looked great in a hoodie. They needed a different kind of court. One with a judge, a jury, and sworn testimony. A place where it's just learning isn't a clever slogan, but a legal argument that has to be proven under oath. And so, they did it. They filed the lawsuit. It wasn't a quiet affair. It was a digital thunderclap. A press release drafted by a coalition of high-powered intellectual property lawyers landed in the inboxes of every major news outlet on the planet. The suit was officially titled Vancidal v. Cognition Corp., a dry legalistic name for what was essentially a declaration of war on behalf of the entire creative human race. Clara Vance, the artist who first noticed the ghost of her signature, was the lead plaintiff, but the et al. A quiet two-letter Latin abbreviation was the real bombshell. It meant "and others." And in this case, others was a placeholder for potentially millions of artists, illustrators, photographers, and designers whose work had been conscripted into SynthCore's digital army without their knowledge or consent. This was the formal RSVP to chaos. The lawsuit was a gilt-edged invitation delivered by a court-martial to the doorstep of the American legal system, an institution personified as a venerable, slightly arthritic grandfather. The legal system, content in its comfortable world of property disputes, messy divorces, and the occasional shipping container-related contract violation, was suddenly handed this glowing, vibrating, alien artifact of a case. It was being asked to preside over a party where the guests included a sentient art blender, a trillion-dollar corporation claiming it had invented a new form of consciousness, and a global army of furious painters. The legal system sighed, adjusted its powdered wig, and knew with a deep sense of foreboding that this was going to give it a terrible headache. The artists' legal arguments, when stripped of their dense legalese, were brutally simple and elegant. They came in 4 main flavors. First, direct copyright infringement, a haymaker of an argument that said, forget the output images for a second. The training data itself, the massive multi-terabyte library of images that Cognition Corp had copied and stored on its servers, was illegal. You can't just photocopy every book in the library to teach your kid to read, and you can't scrape billions of copyrighted images to teach your AI to paint. Each scraped image was an unauthorized copy, and they had made billions of them. Second, derivative works. This tackled the output. The lawyers argued that the images SynthCore produced were, by legal definition, derivative works of the art it was trained on. Just like a movie based on a book is a derivative work, these AI images, which could only exist because of the source material, were legally bound to it. And creating derivative works requires a license, which Cognition Corp most certainly did not have. Third, and perhaps most clever, was the DMCA violation. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act has a very specific clause that makes it illegal to remove or alter copyright management information. Things like, an artist's signature or a watermark. The artists argued that by scraping the images and then generating new ones without the original watermarks, Cognition Corp was committing a separate, distinct, and very jailable offense for every single image. The sloppy AI that left ghostly signatures behind wasn't just a PR problem. It was now Exhibit A in a federal case. Finally, unfair competition. This was the gut punch. They argued that Cognition Corp had taken their life's work, for free, and used it to create a machine that was now being sold as a commercial product to replace them, directly undercutting their ability to make a living. It was the business equivalent of someone stealing your guitar, learning all your songs perfectly, and then getting a gig at the bar down the street for half your price. Personified dialogue. In the penthouse office of Blake Vancer, Cynthia, the razor-sharp head of legal, is standing across from his ridiculously expensive desk holding a tablet displaying the lawsuit filing. Cynthia, Blake, they did it. They actually filed. It's a class action. Vance views Cognition Corp. She's the lead plaintiff, but they're seeking to represent all creators of visual works whose copyrighted material was used as training data for the SynthCore generative model without consent. Blake Vancer leans back in his ergonomic throne, staring at the ceiling. A class action. How very dramatic of them. So what's our play? We stick to the script, right? The it's learning, it's progress, it's transformative fair use angle. Cynthia, our play just acquired a $100 million price tag in legal fees. Their complaint is sharp. Annoyingly so. They're not just whining about the AI's output. Their primary claim is that the database itself is one giant act of infringement. Billions of unauthorized copies. And they're nailing us on the DMCA violation for stripping watermarks. That one has statutory damages, Blake. It has teeth. Blake Vancer. Teeth? Cynthia, we're Cognition Corp. We don't get bitten, we bite. We're on the right side of history here. The law is old. We are new. The law will catch up. It always does. Get the litigation team together. Tell them to cancel their vacations. We're not settling, we are going to war, we'll bury them in motions. It'll be fun. Cynthia turns to leave, muttering under her breath. His definition of fun is going to get us all deposed by the federal government. The meta-commentary here is the sheer earth-shattering significance of this moment. This lawsuit was bigger than just art. It was the first great legal reckoning of the generative AI era. The questions being asked in this courtroom would define the next century of creation and ownership. Can a machine be an artist? Can a corporation own a style? Does a law written in the age of dial-up modems have anything meaningful to say about a technology that can create 1 billion images in a day? The bewildered legal system, with its dusty books and ancient precedents, was now the unwilling referee in the ultimate cage match. Human creativity versus corporate automation. The lawsuit was filed, the battle lines were drawn, and now, the long, painful, and deeply weird process of legal discovery was about to begin. The lawsuit was officially on. The battle had moved from the chaotic, fast-paced world of social media to the slow, methodical, and mind-numbingly expensive world of the federal court system. This is the part of the story that doesn't get a movie montage. This is the discovery phase, a grueling process where both sides are legally obligated to show each other their cards. It involves exchanging mountains of documents, emails, and internal memos. But most importantly, it involves depositions, the grim, airless ritual where lawyers get to question key witnesses under oath in a beige conference room for 7 hours straight. The artist's legal team, led by a lawyer with the cheerful demeanor of a shark, had a long list of people they wanted to talk to. CEO Blake Vancer, the lead engineers, the marketing team that came up with the inspirational learning phase nonsense. But they had a special request. A request so strange, so unprecedented that it sent a ripple of bewildered amusement through the legal community. They wanted to depose Synthcore. Yes, you heard that right. They served a notice of deposition for a piece of software. Their argument was both logically sound and completely insane. Synthcore was the one who allegedly created the infringing images. Therefore, its process, its knowledge, and its decision-making were central to the case. They needed to question the artist. The fact that the artist was a non-sentient network of silicon and code was, to them, a fascinating, but ultimately irrelevant logistical hurdle. Cognition Corp's legal team predictably had a collective aneurysm. They filed a motion to quash, arguing that the request was frivolous, absurd, and an impossible burden. You can't depose a tool, they argued. You don't put a paintbrush on the witness stand and ask it why it made a particular stroke. You don't cross-examine a camera about its f-stop. Synthcore, they insisted, was just a very, very sophisticated paintbrush. The artist's lawyers shot back that this particular paintbrush happened to hold the entirety of the Louvre in its memory and could paint a perfect forgery on command, so perhaps its testimony was in fact relevant. A weary judge, who had clearly drawn the short straw in the case assignment lottery, made a compromise. They would not order the AI itself to be deposed, saving the court from figuring out how to swear in a server rack. But they would compel Cognition Corp to produce the person or persons most knowledgeable about Synthcore's design, training, and operation. And that is how Kyle, the nervous LaCroix sipping engineer from the beginning of our story, found himself in a starched shirt that was 2 sizes too tight, sitting at a long polished table flanked by a squadron of lawyers who billed at $2,000 an hour. He was the designated human vessel for the testimony of a sentient blender. His job was to be the voice of the algorithm, a role for which he had been coached, drilled, and mercilessly prepared for weeks. The goal was simple: answer every question truthfully, but in a way that was so dense with technical jargon and corporate-approved non-speak that it was utterly useless. The deposition was a masterclass in obfuscation. The artist's lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. DeLuca, would ask a simple human question. Kyle, after a brief, terrified glance at his own lawyers, would respond with a paragraph of incomprehensible technobabble. It was like trying to ask a cat for directions to the train station. Personified dialogue. The scene: a sterile, windowless deposition room. A court reporter types silently. A pile of exhibits sits on the table. Ms. DeLuca, artist lawyer. Mr. Henderson, good morning. Let's turn to Plaintiff's Exhibit 47B. Do you recognize this image? Kyle, engineer. It appears to be a PNG file rendered by the SynthCore model. Ms. DeLuca. Indeed, an image of a dragon, generated by your sophisticated paintbrush. Now, I want to draw your attention to this artifact in the bottom right corner. This garbled mess of pixels here. You testified earlier that the model learns concepts. What concept is this? Kyle takes a sip of water, his hand shaking slightly. Well, the model doesn't learn in the human sense. Through a process of stochastic gradient descent, it refines a multi-billion parameter space to identify and replicate statistically significant patterns of high-frequency visual data that often co-occur in the lower quadrant of images within the corpus that were tagged fantasy illustration. Ms. DeLuca. So, a signature. You're describing a signature, a pattern that says, an artist made this. Did you instruct SynthCore to copy artists' signatures? Cognition Corp lawyer. Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. The model is not instructed in that manner. Its weights are refined through unsupervised backpropagation. Kyle, nodding gratefully. Right. We don't instruct it to do anything, really. The model autonomously optimizes its own internal parameters to minimize a cross-entropy loss function. It essentially teaches itself what a completed image is supposed to look like based on the training data. Ms. DeLuca, leaning forward. So, Mr. Henderson, it taught itself to forge signatures. Is that your testimony today? Cognition Corp lawyer. Objection. Mischaracterizes the witness's testimony. He said no such thing. Ms. DeLuca. He said the model taught itself what a completed image looks like, and that apparently includes a forged signature. I'm just trying to understand the curriculum at your robot art school. The meta-commentary of this whole ridiculous exercise is how perfectly it exposes the AI accountability gap. The legal system is built on human concepts: intent, knowledge, motive, memory. How do you apply those to an algorithm? The corporation naturally exploits this gap with glee. They hide their own intent, the corporate mandate to build the most powerful image generator as quickly and cheaply as possible, ethics be damned, behind the impenetrable neutral complexity of the machine. The algorithm becomes the perfect corporate scapegoat. It's never we decided to scrape copyrighted data. It's always the model optimized its parameters based on the available data. The machine's lack of agency is used to absolve its human creators of their own. The deposition dragged on for hours, a circular journey into a hell of non-answers. DeLuca and her team left the room that day with a mountain of useless testimony and a profound sense of frustration. They had tried to question the machine, but all they got was its corporate firewall. It was clear that arguing about the AI's intent was a losing game. They needed to stop talking to the puppet and start looking at the strings. They needed to see the brain itself. And that meant their next legal battle would be to get their hands on the one thing Cognition Corp would guard more fiercely than anything: the training data and the source code. The depositions were a strategic dead end, a frustrating exercise in translating corporate nonsense into plain English. They had to see the crime scene itself, the training data. After a series of heated legal motions where Cognition Corp's lawyers argued that their training dataset was a proprietary trade secret more valuable than the formula for Coca-Cola, the judge finally compelled them to produce a representative sample. But with that order came another one. Cognition Corp had to formally present its core defense strategy. And so, Silicon Valley's legal team, a collection of impeccably dressed sharks who probably charged by the keystroke, unveiled their silver bullet, their grand unifying theory of why the largest art heist in history wasn't actually a crime. Their entire multi-billion-dollar defense would rest on two of the most flexible, contentious, and lawyer-enriching words in the English language: fair use. Now, fair use is a real and important part of copyright law. It is the legal loophole that allows a critic to show a clip from a movie they reviewing a professor to photocopy a chapter of a book for their class, or a comedian to make a parody of a famous song. It's a delicate balancing act, a legal gray area designed to ensure that copyright doesn't completely strangle free speech and education. To decide if something is fair use, courts traditionally look at 4 factors. But Cognition Corp wasn't interested in a delicate balancing act. They were interested in taking this nuanced legal doctrine and reshaping it into a sledgehammer. They gave fair use a full tech bro makeover. Their argument, presented in a 300-page motion dripping with techno-optimism, was that copyright law as we know it is an outdated, analog-era subscription model, and they were simply the disruptive innovators offering a more efficient, free-to-play alternative. They weren't breaking the law. They were rendering it obsolete through sheer glorious innovation. The artists, in their view, were no different from the horse and buggy industry complaining about the invention of the automobile. They took the 4 hallowed factors of fair use and twisted them into a pretzel of self-serving logic. First, the purpose and character of the use. A normal fair use argument here might be that it's for non-profit educational purposes. Cognition Corp, a for-profit company selling a commercial product, audaciously claimed their purpose was highly transformative and for the advancement of human knowledge. They argued that by converting images into a complex mathematical model, they weren't just copying them, they were transforming them into something entirely new, a scientific data set. It's like saying you didn't steal a car, you transformed it into its component parts for the purpose of studying the concept of carness. Second, the nature of the copyrighted work. They argued that since most of the art was scraped from public websites, it was less deserving of protection. By posting their work online, artists were essentially leaving it on the digital curb with a free sign on it. This, of course, completely ignores the fact that publicly accessible has never, ever meant public domain. Third, the amount and substantiality of the portion used. This was a tricky one for them, since they had used 100% of billions of artworks. Their solution was to engage in some truly spectacular philosophical gymnastics. They claimed that while they copied the entirety of each work, they only used the non-expressive, statistical essence of it to train the model. Therefore, they had somehow used everything and nothing at the same time. It's an argument so brazen it almost commands respect. Finally, and most crucially, the effect of the use upon the potential market. This is where the rubber usually meets the road in fair use cases. And this is where their argument achieved liftoff into the stratosphere of pure fantasy. They claimed that synthcore wasn't harming the market for artists. Oh no. It was creating a brand new market for prompt-based creativity and AI-assisted ideation. They argued that the people using their AI were not the same people who would hire a human artist. Therefore, no harm, no foul. This was, of course, news to the thousands of artists who were already losing commissions to clients who decided it was cheaper to just type a sentence into synthcore. Personified dialogue. A gleaming minimalist conference room at Cognition Corp owner's Blake Vancer is pacing. Sloan, the lead outside counsel, is calmly sipping an espresso that costs more than a textbook. Sloan. Okay, Blake, stop pacing. The motion is filed. Our entire universe for the next 2 years is going to revolve around fair use. Blake Vancer. Fair use. Right. The parody song thing. Are we sure this is going to work? It feels a little thin. Sloan. It's not thin, it's bold. We're arguing that what synthcore does is the most transformative use of data in human history. It doesn't copy art. It transcends it. It converts a messy, emotional JPEG into pure, elegant mathematics. The original work is just the raw material for a revolutionary technology. The art is the cocoon. Our model is the butterfly. Blake Vancer, a slow grin spreads across his face. I love it. It's disruptive. Copyright is just a gatekeeping mechanism. It's a subscription model for culture, and its terms of service are terrible. We're offering the world a freemium plan. Sloan. Precisely. We'll argue we're not cannibalizing their market. We're creating an entirely new asset class. The judge is 72 years old. She won't understand latent space, but she'll understand the story of progress. Our job is to frame the plaintiffs not as victims, but as bitter, obsolete craftsmen trying to smash the first printing press. The meta-commentary here is chilling. Cognition Corp's legal strategy was an all-out assault on the very foundations of creative ownership. They were using the language of progress and innovation as a Trojan horse to establish a legal precedent that would allow any corporation to scrape any public data for any commercial purpose as long as they could argue it was transformative. If they won, the internet would no longer be a place to share work. It would be a permanently open, all-you-can-eat buffet for corporate AI. The lawsuit was no longer about SynthCore. It was a battle for the future of the internet itself. The lines were drawn, the arguments were made, and now, the evidence, the long-awaited, deeply feared training data, was about to be revealed. The legal battle over the definition of fair use was a beautiful, abstract war of ideas, fought by expensive lawyers in tailored suits. But while they were arguing philosophy, a much grittier, more consequential battle was being fought over a single Excel spreadsheet. Well, not a single spreadsheet. It was a data manifest so colossally enormous that printing it out would have deforested a significant portion of the Amazon. After months of legal wrangling, the judge had forced Cognition Corp to hand over a log of the data sources used to train SynthCore. It wasn't the images themselves, but something far more damning: the list of URLs. It was the receipt for everything. When the artist's legal team finally received the encrypted hard drives containing the manifest, they knew they were looking at the Rosetta Stone of the entire case. They gathered in their office, a team of lawyers and tech-savvy paralegals, and began the digital archaeology. What they found was not a carefully curated dataset for a scientific experiment. It was the inventory of a global art heist conducted by a kleptomaniac with a vacuum cleaner. The sheer indiscriminate scale of it was breathtaking. Of course, the big names were there. Every public image on ArtStation, DeviantArt, Behance, and Pinterest. Billions of images slurped up without a second thought. But that was just the appetizer. As they dug deeper, the true horror of the Great Scrape began to reveal itself. Cognition Corp hadn't just vacuumed up the art galleries. They had vacuumed up the entire digital world. They found URLs from medical illustration websites, where detailed anatomical drawings designed to educate patients about cancer had been scraped and ingested. They found thousands of Etsy stores, where every product photo of handmade jewelry and custom-printed mugs was now part of the AI's aesthetic vocabulary. They found personal Flickr accounts, untouched for a decade, filled with someone's blurry but cherished family vacation photos from 2008. They found wedding photographers' blogs, where intimate, private moments were now just more training data for the concept of people holding hands. It was a staggering violation of context. A deeply personal memorial portrait, drawn by an artist grieving a lost pet, was treated with the same computational weight as a Nike shoe advertisement. A child's first drawing, proudly uploaded to a parent's blog, was reduced to a set of statistical probabilities about crayon texture. The machine, in its infinite hunger, had consumed everything, blissfully and terrifyingly ignorant of the human meaning attached to any of it. The internet, it turned out, wasn't a public library to SynthCore. It was a dumpster, and it was more than happy to eat the coffee grounds, the love letters, and the discarded lottery tickets all in one go. Then, they found the smoking gun. The legal team had compiled a list of the personal portfolio websites for every one of the named plaintiffs in the class action suit. They ran a search, and there, on line 7432-891 of the manifest, was the URL for Clara Vance's personal website. Every page, every image. They could see the digital footprints where Cognition Corp's scraping bots had crawled through her life's work. It wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't a philosophical debate about learning. It was a direct, traceable line. Here is this specific artist's copyrighted work, and here is the record of you taking it. Personified dialogue, late at night in the war room of the artist's law firm. Empty coffee cups and pizza boxes litter the tables. 3 lawyers are staring intently at a massive screen displaying the scrolling data manifest. Paralegal 1, Leo. Okay, I've isolated the URLs from medical sources. We have over 300,000 images from Gray's Anatomy Online, WebMD's illustration library, and something called the Journal of Parasitic Drawings. I don't even want to know what the AI learned from that. Ms. DeLuca, lead lawyer. Forget the weird stuff for a minute. Focus. Where's the link to our people? Can we prove they targeted the plaintiffs? Paralegal 2, Jenna. Oh, We can do better than that, boss. You need to see this. I'm running a search for our plaintiff's private domain names. Clara Vance's portfolio. https www.google.com/search Q Cartier Clara Vance art. It's here. Dozens of entries. They scraped her entire public gallery. Leo. Wait a second. Look at this entry. It's a link to Clara Vance art. Client WIP Project Titan drafts. That directory is password protected. It must have been accidentally indexed by a Google crawler for 5 minutes 6 years ago. Ms. DeLuca. She slowly removes her glasses, a cold, predatory smile spreading across her face. They didn't just walk through the front door of her gallery and take pictures. They broke into the back office and stole the sketches out of her desk. This isn't just copyright infringement anymore. This is starting to look like a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Jenna. So their whole, we just looked at public art defense is Ms. DeLuca. Dead. They didn't just rob the museum. They robbed the gift shop, the janitor's closet, and the director's private safe. And they left us the receipt. God, I love discovery. This was the moment the case turned. The meta-commentary is about the fundamental philosophical divide between creators and the tech giants. Artists see the internet as a collection of individual spaces, a digital neighborhood. Big tech sees it as a single, undifferentiated, harvestable resource, a vast, open pit mine of data. The revelation of the training manifest exposed this worldview in its rawest form. It proved that the promises of ethical AI and respect for creators were nothing more than a thin layer of PR paint over a deeply exploitative business model. Cognition Corp could no longer hide behind vague, abstract arguments. The evidence was specific, granular, and deeply damning. The lawsuit now had faces, names, and a clear chain of evidence. The artist's team had the receipt, the weapon, and the motive. And just when it seemed that Cognition Corp's behavior couldn't possibly get any more brazen, any more breathtakingly arrogant, they decided to take their bag of stolen goods and open up a storefront. You would think that a company facing a multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit, a company whose internal documents proving a systematic and invasive data scraping operation have just been made public, might adopt a slightly more cautious posture. You might expect them to lie low, to project an image of sober contrition, to perhaps stop poking the hornet's nest with a stick. You would be thinking like a rational human being, which is the first mistake when trying to predict the behavior of a Silicon Valley behemoth. Cognition Corp did not lie low. They did not show contrition. They took the stick they were using to poke the hornet's nest, attached a credit card reader to it, and began charging admission to the poking. While the lawsuit was slowly grinding its way through the bowels of the legal system, Cognition Corp's product team was apparently working overtime. One morning, without any warning, users of SynthCore woke up to a notification about a major new update, a revolutionary, game-changing new premium feature. Up until this point, using the AI had been a bit of a stylistic crapshoot. You could ask for a painting of a cat, but the style you got back was a weird generic blend of the millions of cat paintings in the dataset. But with the new update, a little text box appeared in the user interface. It was labeled, in the style of, "This was the plot twist that nobody, not even the most cynical lawyers on the artist's team, saw coming." Cognition Corp, in a moment of pure, unadulterated weapons-grade audacity, had decided to start explicitly monetizing the heist. They had productized the identities of the very artists they had stolen from. The feature was diabolically simple. You could now type in a futuristic cityscape in the style of Sid Mead, or a fantasy warrior in the style of Frank Frazetta, or, and here is where the story tips over into the theater of the absurd, an ethereal landscape in the style of Clara Vance. Yes, that Clara Vance. The lead plaintiff in the lawsuit against them, her unique artistic signature, the thing she had spent her entire adult life developing, was now a drop-down menu option in the software that had been built on the back of her own stolen work. The sheer supernova-level gall of this move cannot be overstated. This is the business equivalent of a burglar breaking into your house, stealing your television, and then setting up a booth on your front lawn the next day to sell tickets to a screening of a movie playing on your stolen TV. And when you come out to scream at them, they just smile and ask if you want to buy a popcorn. It was a move so brazen, so contemptuous of the legal process, of ethics, of basic human decency, that it felt like a prank. But it wasn't. It was their new business model. Cognition Corp wasn't just a dismissive parent or a gaslighting professor anymore. They had evolved into their final form, the unrepentant supervillain. They were radiating an aura of untouchable, sociopathic confidence. They weren't just breaking the rules. They were laughing at the very idea that rules applied to them. The lawsuit wasn't a threat to be managed. It was a minor operational nuisance, a gnat to be swatted away while they got on with the important business of counting their money. Personified dialogue, an emergency internal marketing meeting at Cognition Corp. The vibe is a chaotic mix of excitement and panic. Jessica, the VP of marketing, is at the whiteboard. Jessica: "Okay team, the style replicator feature is launching tonight. We're moving ahead of schedule. Legal is having a sustained panic attack in their soundproof meditation room, so the messaging for this launch needs to be bulletproof." Young marketer Braden: "Okay, I get it. So we lean into creative empowerment. Your vision, any style. It's clean, it's simple, it's legally vague, I love it." Jessica: "Exactly. For the launch video and all official press materials, we will only feature the styles of artists who are extremely, unambiguously dead. I'm talking Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Hokusai. Artists whose copyrights have expired and whose estates are too disorganized to sue us effectively. It's the safest ground." Braden: "Got it. But the feature, it works for living artists too, right? Like, it works for, them." Jessica: a thin, confident smile. "The feature works for any artist whose work represents more than 0.01% of the training data. The user community will figure out that it works for their favorite living artists within minutes. We don't have to advertise it, they'll do it for us. We get all the benefit without any of the legal liability for direct marketing." Braden: "So we're selling access to the styles of the people who are actively suing us, but we're just not going to put their names on the box? That is diabolical." I love it. Jessica: "It's not diabolical, Braden, it's preemptive monetization, a term I believe our CEO coined. The theory is if we make so much money from the feature before the lawsuit concludes, any potential settlement or fine will just be a rounding error. It's the cost of doing business. Now, let's talk subscription tiers. How much do you think we can charge for a soul?" The meta-commentary here is a bleak lesson in modern capitalism. Cognition Corp had done the math. They had calculated the potential profit from selling instant, on-demand access to every art style in the world, and they had calculated the maximum possible fine they could receive from losing the lawsuit. The profit number was bigger. Much bigger. For them, it was no longer a question of right and wrong. It was a simple cost-benefit analysis. The law was not a moral framework. It was a financial risk to be managed. A fine wasn't a punishment. It was simply the price of the ticket. For the artists, this was the ultimate violation. Their work hadn't just been scraped for data. It had been dissected, quantified, and turned into a commercial product. Their very identity, the ineffable, hard-won thing that was their style, was now a cheap digital commodity, available to anyone with a credit card and a dream. The war was no longer about compensation for past theft. It was now about stopping the ongoing public desecration of their life's work. The launch of the Style Replicator was a commercial triumph and a moral cataclysm. Cognition Corp's servers were humming, their subscription numbers were skyrocketing, and their stock price was behaving like it had just snorted a line of pure, uncut venture capital. The public, for the most part, was delighted. The ability to generate a picture of Kermit the Frog in the style of Caravaggio was just too much fun to get bogged down by messy ethics. For the artists, however, it was a daily, waking nightmare. They were watching, in real time, as their names, their actual human names, were turned into keywords, into cheap aesthetic filters, into a verb. Just synthcore it in Clara's style, people would say on forums. In the face of this, Cognition Corp's leadership had a choice. They could see the fury, the pain, and the ongoing lawsuit, and perhaps decide they had pushed things far enough. Or they could look at their exploding revenue charts and conclude that the only real problem was that they weren't being audacious enough. They of course chose the latter. They decided to add another, even more exquisitely insulting layer to their monetization cake. They unveiled a new, tiered subscription model. There was the basic plan for casual users. There was the Pro plan, which unlocked the coveted style replicator. And then there was a new, top-tier option, a premium package announced with a gushing press release and a slick marketing video. It was called the Creator Tier, and it was aimed squarely at professional artists. For the low price of $49.99 a month, an artist, a living, breathing, human artist, could get priority server access, unlimited generations, and the highest fidelity model output when using synthcore to generate images in their own style. Let's just pause for a moment to fully appreciate the magnificent, diamond-hard perfection of this insult. This is a business model that could only be conceived in the deepest, most soulless recesses of a late-stage capitalist fever dream. The sequence of events is as follows. Step 1. A corporation trains an AI on your life's work without your knowledge or consent. Step 2. They turn your unique artistic identity into a commercial software feature. Step 3. They then have the testicular fortitude to approach you, the original artist, and graciously offer you the opportunity to pay them a monthly fee for the privilege of using a high-quality version of their stolen, plagiarized copy of you. This is not just theft. This is a protection racket disguised as a SaaS product. Cognition Corp had become the innovative landlord who evicts you from your house, builds a hotel on the land, names the presidential suite after you, and then offers you a 10% discount on a weekend stay. They framed this, of course, not as the cosmic insult that it was, but as an incredible opportunity. The marketing campaign for the Creator Tier was a torrent of empowerment buzzwords. Collaborate with your own AI twin, the ads chirped. Supercharge your creative workflow. Never suffer from artist's block again. With the Creator Tier, you are in the driver's seat of your own aesthetic. It was a brilliant, sociopathic trap. It presented artists with an impossible choice. Option A, refuse to pay, and watch as the market is flooded with thousands of cheap, low-quality imitations of your style, generated by amateurs, devaluing your brand and your livelihood. Option B, pay the company that stole from you for the privilege of using their superior tool to create forgeries of your own work, just so you can keep up with the pace of your own automated competition. It was an attempt to make themselves the indispensable middlemen, the gatekeepers to an artist's own creativity. Personified dialogue, a fictionalized customer service call. Sarita, a plaintiff in the lawsuit, is on the phone with a disturbingly cheerful Cognition Corp creator success specialist. Sarita, the artist. Hi, yes, I'm trying to understand your new Creator Tier. Let me see if I have this right. I'm a painter. My name is Sarita Chen. Your company trained its AI on my paintings, which I never gave you permission to do. And now I'm reading on your website that for $49.99 a month, I can get premium access to an AI model of myself, Chase, Cognition Corp rep. That's exactly right, Sarita. Isn't that an amazing tool? Think of it as your own personal, tireless digital assistant. You can use the Sarita Chen V4 model to rapidly prototype new ideas, explore different color palettes for a commission, or even generate high-res base layers for your physical paintings. It's the ultimate workflow accelerator. Sarita. The Sarita Chen V4 model? You've turned my name into a software version number. I feel like I should be reporting a bug. Do I at least get paid when other people use the Sarita Chen V4 model to create images? Chase. That is a great question, and we have some very exciting announcements coming soon about our new creator partnership programs. But for now, the Creator Tier is really the best way to ensure that you, the original artist, stay in the driver's seat of your own unique aesthetic. You wouldn't want lower quality, less authentic versions of your style flooding the market and diluting your brand, would you? Sarita, muttering to herself. That wasn't a sales pitch. That was a threat. Chase. What was that, Sarita? I was just saying it's all about empowering you to own your digital identity. The meta-commentary here is the sheer psychological cruelty of the strategy. It moves beyond simple corporate greed into the realm of a power play. Cognition Corp wasn't just devaluing the artist's labor. They were trying to devalue their very sense of self. Your style, that ineffable quality that comes from years of practice, pain, and passion, is no longer yours. It's a dataset. It's a model. It's a product. And if you want to use it, you have to pay the people who took it from you. This move sent a fresh shockwave of incandescent rage through the art community. The lawsuit was no longer just about damages. It was existential. They were fighting for the very idea that an artist's identity belongs to them. And just as this new insulting business model was becoming the new front in the war, Cognition Corp, sensing that perhaps, just perhaps, they had angered the Hornets a little too much, decided it was time to extend an olive branch. An olive branch that was, of course, also on fire. Just when the artists thought they had reached the absolute bedrock of corporate cynicism, Cognition Corp brought out a jackhammer. The creator tier subscription model, while a commercial success, was a PR disaster. The narrative of "pay us to use a copy of you" was just too perfectly villainous to spin. Facing a unified, enraged artistic community and a legal case that was looking uglier by the day, the company decided it was time for a new tactic. It was time to feign reasonableness. It was time to extend an olive branch. An olive branch that, upon closer inspection, was made of plastic covered in poison ivy and rigged to explode. With great fanfare, CEO Blake Vancer held a special press conference. He stood at a sleek, minimalist podium, his face a carefully constructed mask of humility and visionary zeal. He announced that Cognition Corp had listened to the community and was ready to build a new, more equitable future together. He then unveiled his masterstroke, the Creator Partnership Program. The program, he explained, was a revolutionary new way to share the success of synthcore with the very artists who had inspired it. The deal was this: any artist whose style was identifiable within the AI model could voluntarily opt in to the program. Once they opted in, they would be officially recognized as a Cognition partner, and as a partner they would receive a generous royalty, a small piece of the revenue, every single time a user generated an image using their name in the style of prompt. It sounded almost reasonable. A partnership. Royalties. It was the language the artists had been screaming for. But the devil, as always, was in the terms of service. To opt in, an artist had to sign a digital agreement. And buried deep in the 27 pages of dense legalese was the poison pill. A clause stating that by agreeing to become a Cognition partner and accepting this new royalty structure, the artist hereby waived all past, present, and future legal claims against Cognition Corp relating to copyright infringement, data usage, or any other matter concerning the training of the synthcore model. It wasn't a partnership program. It was a trap. It was a global settlement offer disguised as a royalty check. They were offering to pay the artists a few digital pennies in the future, but only if they signed a legally binding confession stating that the original multi-billion-dollar heist had been a gift. It was the ultimate act of gaslighting. The thief who stole your life savings after investing it and making millions comes back and offers to buy you a coffee, but only if you'll tell the police you lent him the money. And the royalty itself? It was an insult wrapped in an algorithm. Blake Vancer, with a straight face, announced they would be offering a competitive revenue share of 0.01% of the compute cost per generation. Let's do some quick, soul-destroying math on that. The compute cost to generate a single image is a microscopic fraction of a cent. CEO Blake Vancer at a brightly lit press conference taking questions. Blake Vancer. And so today I am incredibly proud to officially launch the Cognition Corp Creator Partnership Program. We believe the artists who inspire our models are our foundational partners, and it's time our business model reflected that. From this day forward, any creator whose style is part of the synthcore engine can opt in to receive a royalty for every single image generated using their unique aesthetic. Journalist 1. Mr. Vancer, can you specify the royalty rate? Blake Vancer. Absolutely. We're disrupting the old models. We're offering a dynamic, competitive revenue share of 0.01% of the dedicated compute cost per generation. Think of it as a micro-royalty for a new economy of micro-creations. We're building the future of creative monetization from the ground up. Journalist 2. A follow-up, Mr. Vancer. Our legal team has reviewed the 30-page terms of service for this program. It states that to opt in, artists must waive all legal claims against your company for the initial data scraping. Isn't this just a transparent attempt to get them to drop the class action lawsuit for fractions of a penny? Blake Vancer smiles unflappable. This isn't about the past. This is about building the future together. We're extending an invitation to partner with us in this new frontier. You can either be on the train of progress, working with us to shape what comes next, or you can stand on the tracks and complain about the noise. We sincerely hope creators will choose to join us on this incredible journey. The meta-commentary here is the weaponization of public relations. Cognition Corp knew perfectly well that no serious artist, certainly none of the plaintiffs, would ever accept this garbage offer. The offer wasn't for them. It was for the media, the public, and most importantly, the judge. It was a strategic performance of reasonableness. They could now go into court and say, with feigned sincerity, "Your Honor, we tried to solve this. We offered them a partnership. We offered them a way to get paid, but they refused." These artists aren't interested in a solution. They're just interested in a massive payday. It was a cynical masterstroke, designed to reframe the artists as the greedy, unreasonable party. For the artists, this was the final, unforgivable insult. It wasn't just an offer, it was a taunt. A public demonstration of how little Cognition Corp valued them, their work, and their intelligence. Any lingering microscopic possibility of a reasonable good faith settlement evaporated in that press conference. The company had made it clear they would not apologize, they would not compensate, and they would not admit wrongdoing. They would only offer traps disguised as gifts. The artists' resolve hardened from steel into diamond. This would not end with a partnership. This would end with a verdict. The Creator Partnership Program was, as expected, a spectacular failure. It was so transparently manipulative that it actually unified the artists even further. The battle lines were no longer just drawn. They were carved into the earth, filled with gasoline, and set ablaze. The lawsuit was proceeding. Depositions were being fought over, and the whole mess was mired in the glacial pace of federal litigation. And in this chaotic stalemate, something strange and unforeseen began to happen. The algorithm, the silent, sentient blender at the heart of the storm, started to develop a personality. And that personality was a petty, bureaucratic, and deeply stupid landlord. To add a veneer of legitimacy to their new style replicator and creator tier products, Cognition Corp had to pretend that the styles generated by SynthCore were, in fact, protectable assets. To do this, they integrated their AI with the automated copyright enforcement systems used by major online platforms like ArtStation, Instagram, and others. You know these systems. They are the reason your vacation video gets muted because a Taylor Swift song was playing on the radio in the background. They are blunt, automated instruments of copyright protection designed to scan uploads and flag anything that matches a registered asset. Cognition Corp, in its wisdom, registered the outputs of SynthCore as their assets, and they gave SynthCore itself the keys to the car, allowing it to help patrol the internet for infringements of its own work. The result was a feedback loop of pure, unadulterated irony. The snake began to eat its own tail, and it found it delicious. Let's go back to our hero, Clara Vance. After another frustrating day of dealing with her lawyers, she decides to do the one thing that brings her solace: paint. She creates a beautiful new piece, a stunning landscape of a futuristic city, 100% original, drawn with her own hands, imbued with her own soul. Proud of her work, she uploads it to her online portfolio, and 20 minutes later, she receives an email. It's an automated notice. Her new painting, her original work, has been taken down. The reason? A copyright claim. And the claimant? Cognition Corp. This is the moment the story achieves a kind of dark dystopian poetry. The AI, SynthCore, now acting as an automated copyright enforcer, had scanned Clara's new painting. It compared her work to the mountain of data it had on the Clara Vance style, a style it knew with perfect mathematical intimacy because it had ingested her entire life's work. The system registered a 98.7% stylistic match, and since Cognition Corp now claimed to be the licensor of the official Clara Vance style, the algorithm did its job. It concluded that this new painting was an unauthorized derivative of its own licensed product. It flagged the original as a copy of the copy. Synthcore was no longer just a tool, it had been promoted. It was now a hall monitor with a god complex, a petty landlord who has decided you bear a suspicious resemblance to the person on the lease, and has therefore changed the locks. It began sending out a flurry of automated DMCA takedown notices to the very artists whose work had been its primary food source. An artist would post a new character design, and the system would flag it for being too similar to the AI's version of their style. A photographer would upload a new portrait, and the system would take it down for infringing on the photorealistic model that was trained on their own photos. Victims of a robbery were now being issued citations for loitering at the scene of the crime. Personified dialogue, a fictionalized support chat window. Clara is trying to appeal the automated takedown. Clara, hello. I am writing to appeal a DMCA takedown notice issued against my new painting, Sunset over Neo Kyoto. The claim is fraudulent. Synthcore support bot, with a cheerful generic avatar. Thank you for contacting Cognition Corp support. I'm Cynthia, your virtual assistant. I see the notice you're referring to. Clara. I am Clara Vance. That is my style. Your robot is accusing me of infringing on myself. Cynthia. I understand this can be frustrating. Stylistic similarity can be a complex issue. To expedite your appeal, can you please provide documentation proving you have a valid license to create and distribute new works in the style of Clara Vance? Clara. A license to be myself? I have a birth certificate. Does that count? This is insane. Cynthia. A birth certificate is not a recognized form of intellectual property licensure under our current terms of service. I have logged your appeal. A human representative will review your case in 90 to 120 business days. Thank you for helping us keep our platform creative and original. Have a wonderful day. The meta-commentary is that this isn't just a glitch in the system. It is the system, working as intended. This is the dystopian endpoint of handing over enforcement of something as nuanced as artistic style to a machine that thinks in probabilities. Cognition Corp, in its quest for total market dominance, was attempting a kind of digital coup. They wanted to create a closed loop, a walled garden where their AI was not just the primary tool for creation, but also the judge, jury, and executioner for copyright disputes. It was a system designed to inherently favor the machine over its human progenitors. The goal was no longer just to sell AI art. It was to control the very definition of originality in the digital age. This new development added a fresh, tangible layer of harm to the artist's legal case. They weren't just being exploited. Their ability to do business was now being actively and algorithmically choked off. As the chaos mounted and the headlines got weirder, the stench of disruption and controversy began to attract a new and even more chaotic group of actors to the scene. A group that saw this technological tire fire not as a problem to be solved, but as a brand new market opportunity. Into this swirling vortex of corporate malfeasance, legal warfare, and algorithmic insanity, a new faction arrived. They descended from the clouds of the decentralized internet not on chariots of fire, but on a wave of incomprehensible jargon and unsolicited advice. They were the crypto evangelists, the NFT true believers, the Web3 missionaries. And they had seen the chaos, the gnashing of teeth, the existential crisis over digital ownership, and they had come to a single, ecstatic conclusion. We can slap a blockchain on that. This legion of techno-optimists, who communicated primarily through Twitter Spaces and Discord announcements, crashed the party like a well-meaning but deeply annoying cousin at a funeral. They surveyed the battlefield, the exploited artists on one side, the rapacious corporation on the other, and declared that they, and only they, possessed the silver bullet, the one true technological faith that could save everyone's soul. That faith was, of course, the blockchain. Their pitch was seductive in its simplicity and maddening in its tone deafness. The problem, they preached, wasn't corporate greed or weak copyright law. The problem was centralization. The problem was that artists were still posting their work as dumb JPEGs on legacy Web 2 platforms. If only, they sighed, everyone had been minting their artwork as non-fungible tokens, NFTs, from the start. If they had, there would be an immutable, cryptographically secured public ledger of provenance and ownership for every single piece of art. The AI scraper, they argued with a straight face, could have simply checked the blockchain, seen the art was owned, and politely moved on. It was a solution of breathtaking naivete, willfully ignoring the fact that Cognition Corp's business model was predicated on not asking for permission. It was like arguing that a new high-tech lock would have stopped a burglar who had simply kicked the door down. But their solutions didn't stop there. They proposed a whole new ecosystem. Artists should mint their original works as NFTs. Then, when Synthcore generates a new piece of art, it too could be minted as a derivative NFT, which would be programmatically linked to the original. A smart contract could then automatically send a 0.00001% micro royalty of the sale price back to the original artist's crypto wallet. Problem solved. Everyone wins. The theft is no longer theft. It's now an on-chain, permissionless, monetized collaboration. The supreme irony, the cherry on top of this sundae of unsolicited solutions, was that the NFT world itself had been a major source of the problem. The early NFT boom was a digital Wild West, rife with its own rampant art theft, where scammers would mint entire galleries of art they had simply right-clicked and saved from other artists' websites. The very culture of disruptive technology and code as law, which championed moving fast and breaking traditional structures, was the exact same ideological fuel powering Cognition Corp's data-scraping engines. The crypto crowd was now showing up to the fire they had helped start, selling everyone artisanal blockchain-powered fire extinguishers, personified dialogue, a fictional Twitter EX Spaces conversation. Clara is a guest trying to explain the lawsuit. A prominent Web3 thought leader is also on stage. Clara, the artist. And so the latest is that their automated system is now sending me copyright takedown notices for posting my own original paintings. It's a complete nightmare. We're fighting it in court, but it's a slow process. CryptoChad420, Web3 evangelist. Yo, Clara, major respect for what you're doing, but this is literally the perfect use case for why everything needs to be on-chain. Like, for real. If your original Sunset over Neo Kyoto was an ERC-721 token, its provenance would be immutable. The AI scraper bot could just ping the blockchain, see the smart contract doesn't grant it a training license, and boom. Problem solved. It's a trustless solution for a broken high-trust system. Clara, but the scraper bot doesn't care. It's designed not to care. It's not going to ping the blockchain. It's just going to take the publicly visible JPEG. CryptoChad420. See, you're still thinking in a Web 2 paradigm, sis. On the new decentralized art platforms we're building, the front end will be fully integrated. And check this, here's the real alpha. You could form a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization to govern your own art style. Your fans could buy governance tokens, they could vote on what you paint next. You could completely tokenize your own creative output. Clara, respectfully, I have absolutely no desire to set up a decentralized autonomous organization to govern my soul. I just want a massive corporation to stop stealing my work and then suing me for it. CryptoChad420. But that's the thing. You don't need to sue in Web 3. The smart contract is the law. We're building a better future. The meta-commentary here is the seductive but dangerous allure of techno-solutionism, the belief that any complex social, ethical, or legal problem can be solved by simply inventing a cleverer piece of software. The NFT crowd, much like the AI crowd at Cognition Corp, saw the world not as a network of humans, but as a system of inefficiencies that could be optimized with code. They didn't see a story of exploitation. They saw a market failure in the provenance tracking industry. Their arrival didn't help the artists. It just added another layer of confusing jargon and distracting noise to an already convoluted public debate. The news was no longer just about the lawsuit. It was now filled with explainers on what an NFT was and whether blockchain could really solve art theft. This confusion and complexity played directly into Cognition Corp's hands. The more chaotic and incomprehensible the situation became for the average person, the harder it was for the artist's simple, clear message. They stole our work, to cut through the noise. For months, the war between the artists and Cognition Corp had been a niche conflict, a fascinating but complex drama playing out in the specialized theaters of tech blogs, art forums, and legal journals. The general public was vaguely aware of it, but it was just more noise in the chaotic symphony of the daily news cycle. A convoluted story about computers and copyright complicated further by the arrival of the NFT evangelists babbling about blockchains. It was confusing. It was technical. And then suddenly, it wasn't. The story reached a critical mass of absurdity. The sheer compounding layers of villainy, the initial theft, the gaslighting PR, the pay-to-use-yourself subscription, the AI suing its own creators, finally collapsed under their own weight and formed a singularity of pure, uncut, easily digestible injustice. The catalyst was a 15-minute segment on a major primetime news magazine show. It wasn't a tech report. It was a human interest story. It featured a long, sympathetic interview with Clara Vance. She wasn't talking about data models or legal precedent. She sat in her small studio, surrounded by her physical paintings, and simply told her story. She talked about the years it took to find her style, the joy of creation, and the bizarre, Kafkaesque nightmare of receiving a legal threat from a machine that had stolen her soul. The show then cut to a montage of CEO Blake Vancer's greatest hits. The clip of him calling the AI a baby, his smug dismissal of the artist's concerns, his baffling press conference announcing the 0.01% royalty partnership. Juxtaposed with Clara's quiet dignity, Blake's techno-utopian babble didn't sound visionary. It sounded sociopathic, and that was it. The dam broke. The beast known as public opinion, which had been slumbering, confused, and distracted, finally awoke. And it was furious. The story went radioactive. It was no longer about derivative data models. It was about a corporate Goliath bullying a legion of Davids. It was a simple, powerful, and infuriating story that anyone with a soul could understand. And suddenly everyone had a fiery opinion on it. Your grandma in Ohio, who still calls any video game console a Nintendo, was calling you, incensed, to talk about the ethics of generative adversarial networks. The barista who makes your morning oat milk latte was shaking their head in disgust, explaining to a customer how Cognition Corp's business model was a perfect example of late-stage capitalism's corrosive effect on human creativity. Late-night comedians had a field day. A tech company in California has created an AI that's so advanced, it learned how to steal, lie about it, and then bill the victim for the stolen goods. The AI is now running for Congress. Your Boycott Cognition Corp trended worldwide for 72 straight hours. Saturday Night Live did a sketch where a toaster sued its owner for making toast that was too similar to its own licensed toasting style. The memes were relentless. Blake Vancer's face was photoshopped onto the body of a spoiled toddler throwing a tantrum in a mountain of cash. Personified dialogue. A fictional transcript from the wildly popular morning talk show Brenda and Mark in the AM. Brenda, perky, sipping from a giant mug. And we are back. Okay, Mark. Before we get to our celebrity chef, I have to ask you about this story that is everywhere. This Cognition Corp, the art computer company. My phone has been buzzing off the hook about this. Mark, folksy, leaning back in his chair. Brenda, it is the craziest, most perfectly modern story I have ever heard. So this giant company builds a computer. The computer looks at all the art on the entire internet, your art, my art, everyone's art, and learns how to paint. Okay, weird, but fine. Brenda, the future is now. Mark, right. But then, and this is the part that sends me, the computer starts sending copyright infringement notices to the original human artists for making new art that looks too much like their own art. Brenda, stop it. No, it did not. That's hilarious. And wasn't there a thing where the CEO said the computer was just a baby? I've got a 4-year-old at home. He draws on the walls with a crayon. He doesn't send me a cease and desist letter and a bill for the crayon. Mark. Exactly. It's nuts. And now they're telling the artists that if they want to keep up, they have to pay a monthly subscription to use the computer version of themselves. My Aunt Carol called me about this yesterday. She's 78. She crochets. And she said, "Mark, that's just a damn racket." Oh, and you know what? If Aunt Carol in Pensacola thinks you're running a racket, your company is in big, big trouble. The meta-commentary is on the nature of viral outrage in the 21st century. It's not always the most important or the most harmful stories that capture the public imagination. It's the ones that are the most perfectly, simply, and often comically unjust. Cognition Corp's multi-layered campaign of exploitation was, in a way, too clever for its own good. It had created a narrative so perfectly villainous, so elegantly evil, that it became a cultural touchstone, a parable for all our modern anxieties about tech, greed, and automation. They were no longer facing a lawsuit. They were facing a full-blown brand implosion. Their stock price was in a nosedive. Politicians, smelling blood in the water and an easy PR win, started making vaguely threatening statements about the need for regulation in the AI space. Cognition Corp.'s army of lawyers had brilliantly prepared for a legal fight based on the complex nuances of copyright law. They were not, however, prepared for a fight against Aunt Carol from Pensacola and her crocheting needles of justice. The court of public opinion had reached its verdict. Now, they just had to see if the actual court would agree. The court of public opinion had delivered a swift and brutal guilty verdict. Cognition Corp was now, in the eyes of the world, a cartoon supervillain, one step away from tying an artist to a set of railroad tracks. But a courtroom is not the same as Twitter. Here, in the hallowed wood-paneled halls of the United States District Court, hashtags have no power, and memes are not admissible as evidence. Here, Cognition Corp's army of lawyers, unbowed by the public relations nightmare, had to make their stand. And they did so with an argument so audaciously abstract, so philosophically slippery, that it made their "the AI is a baby" defense look like a model of straightforward common sense. The scene was a pivotal pre-trial hearing. The gallery was packed to the gills with journalists, sketch artists, and a silent unified phalanx of painters, illustrators, and photographers. CEO Blake Vancer was conspicuously absent, having been advised by his legal team that his smirking, hoodie-clad presence might not play well with a 72-year-old federal judge. On one side of the room sat Ms. DeLuca and her team, representing the artists, their faces grim and determined. On the other side sat Sloan, Cognition Corp's lead counsel, radiating an aura of icy, imperturbable calm. The issue at hand was the artist's motion for a preliminary injunction, in order to force Cognition Corp to shut down the style replicator feature while the case proceeded. To fight this, Sloan had to argue that the artists were unlikely to win their underlying case, and to do that, she had to attack the very foundation of their claim. She stepped up to the podium, and with the unwavering confidence of someone who is paid $10 million a year to make absurdities sound plausible, she argued that her client hadn't actually stolen anything that the law recognized as property. Her argument boiled down was this: copyright law protects specific tangible expressions of an idea, a specific painting, a specific photograph, a specific sculpture. It does not, she purred, protect the underlying style or idea of the work. An artist's personal, unique, and recognizable aesthetic, the sum total of their creative choices, their years of practice, their very soul poured onto the canvas, was, in the cold eyes of the law, just a collection of uncopyrightable techniques. It was a method, it was a process, it was a vibe. And you, she declared to a stunned and silent courtroom, can't copyright a vibe. It was a breathtaking moment of legal jujitsu. She was attempting to use the limitations of copyright law, a doctrine designed to protect creators, as a weapon against them. She argued that what synthcore had ingested wasn't the art itself, but the statistical patterns behind the art. It didn't copy Clara Vance's paintings. It learned the mathematical probability of her color palette, the typical vectors of her brush strokes, the recurring themes in her subject matter. It had, in essence, reverse-engineered her vibe. And since a vibe is an intangible, unprotectable concept, Cognition Corp was free to analyze it, quantify it, productize it, and sell it for $9.99 a month. This was the ultimate commodification of creativity. It was a legal argument that attempted to surgically separate the artist from their artistry, to declare their most valuable and personal asset, their unique voice, their identity, as a worthless, unownable public resource. Personified dialogue. In the courtroom, the Honorable Judge Eleanor Morrison, a woman with a reputation for suffering no fools, is peering over her glasses at Cognition Corp's lawyer. Judge Morrison: Ms. Sloan, let me see if I am following your argument. Your client's machine, SynthCore, ingests millions of copyrighted images created by a specific artist. Let's use the plaintiff, Ms. Vance. It then produces entirely new images that are advertised in your company's own marketing materials as being in the style of Clara Vance. And you are standing here today and arguing that this does not constitute copyright infringement? Sloan, the lawyer: That is precisely our position, Your Honor. We argue that what the model learns and replicates is not the protectable expression contained in any of Ms. Vance's specific works, but rather her non-protectable style. Copyright law is exceptionally clear on this point. It does not, and has never, protected a style, a technique, or a general idea. Judge Morrison: So what, in your legal opinion, is an artist's style? If I see a canvas with melting clocks and surrealist landscapes, I might say it's Dalí-esque. What is that, in the eyes of the court? Sloan: Legally, Your Honor, that is a vibe. It's an aesthetic impression. It is a collection of unprotectable elements. You cannot copyright the idea of a melting clock. You cannot copyright the technique of surrealism. Our technology does not copy the specific expressive arrangement of paint on any one of Dalí's canvases. It simply learns the statistical properties of the artist's overall vibe. And a vibe, Your Honor, is fundamentally in the public domain. Judge Morrison slowly takes off her glasses, rubs the bridge of her nose, and stares at Sloan for a long, painful moment. A vibe. Your entire multi-billion-dollar legal defense, the cornerstone of your argument in a landmark case for the 21st century, is that you didn't steal the art, you just stole the artist's vibe. Sloan: With respect, Your Honor, that is a simplification, but it is the correct legal conclusion. The meta-commentary was hanging thick in the air. This was the endgame of the tech bro mindset, applied to the law. It was an attempt to deconstruct something deeply human into a set of abstract data points that could be declared ownerless and then exploited. If their argument succeeded, it would create a legal loophole wide enough to drive a fleet of server farms through. It would mean that any corporation could, with impunity, train an AI on the entire creative output of any living artist and sell a perfect mimic of their identity, while the artists themselves could do nothing. The entire courtroom seemed to be holding its breath. The judge looked at Sloan, then at the stone-faced artists in the gallery. The future of creative ownership was hanging on her interpretation of a single, ridiculous, and profoundly important word: vibe. While the lawyers were engaged in a high-stakes battle of semantics, trying to pin down the legal definition of a vibe, a quiet and deeply ironic drama was unfolding in the back of the courtroom. Federal courtrooms, in their infinite analog wisdom, typically ban cameras. They are seen as intrusive, prejudicial, capable of turning a sober legal proceeding into a media circus. And so, the only visual record of this landmark, hyper-modern, digital-age trial was being created by a woman named Martha, armed with a charcoal pencil and a pad of textured paper. A courtroom sketch artist was drawing a trial about an AI that could render a photorealistic masterpiece in seconds. The irony was so thick you could have sculpted it. Here was a legal battle that would determine the future of artistic creation, a conflict that pitted human artists against a machine designed to make their skills obsolete. And the entire visual narrative of this fight was being entrusted to one of the oldest, most fundamentally human forms of artistic expression. The one job in the room that, for now, was utterly safe from automation. The court in its procedural conservatism had accidentally made a profound statement. When it came to capturing the truth of a human moment, it still trusted a subjective, interpretive, charcoal-smudged human hand over the cold, objective lens of a machine. Martha was a veteran. She'd sketched mob bosses, politicians, and celebrity defendants. Her process was a blur of practiced efficiency. She captured the stern, weary expression of Judge Morrison, The predatory confidence of Sloane at the podium, the exhausted defiance of Clairvance and the other artists sitting in the front row. These were faces, human emotions, the familiar territory of her craft. But then she faced a unique philosophical challenge. How exactly do you draw the star witness when it's an invisible, multi-billion parameter neural network distributed across a server farm in Oregon? How do you sketch an AI? This artistic problem was a perfect microcosm of the entire trial. The lawyers, the judge, everyone was struggling to grasp the nature of this thing. Was it a tool, like a paintbrush? Was it an entity, like a corporation? Was it a child, as its CEO claimed? Or was it just a ghost, a statistical specter haunting the halls of the internet? Martha knew that drawing a blinking server rack or a generic sci-fi robot would be a failure. It wouldn't capture the truth of the defendant. The defendant wasn't a box of wires. The defendant was the act of consumption itself. So as Sloane stood at the podium, eloquently arguing that her client had only stolen a vibe, Martha began to sketch. Personified dialogue, the internal monologue of Martha, the sketch artist. Okay, Morrison's easy. All sharp angles and judicial gravitas. Got her, the Cognition Corp lawyer, a shark in a Chanel suit. Done. The artists in the gallery. It's the same look I saw on those families during the foreclosure trials, a mix of terror and righteous anger. I know that look. I can draw that look in my sleep. But how in God's name do you draw the main character? The villain? The whole reason we're here? How do you put a face on a piece of code that lives in a cloud? Do I draw a robot sitting at the defense table? Too on the nose. Cliched. A glowing, pulsating brain in a jar, even worse. A server rack, it's just a filing cabinet. No, that's not what this thing is. It's not a physical presence, it's a shadow. A shadow made of other people's light, that's it. Martha flips to a fresh page. She draws the defense table, but she leaves the chair for the defendant conspicuously empty. But rising up from behind the table, she begins to sketch a vast, swirling, spectral cloud. It's a chaotic collage of half-formed images. The ghost of a signature here. A distorted, screaming face from a fantasy painting there. The faint outline of a stock photo watermark woven into the background. It's a poltergeist made of stolen art. A haunting visual representation of a billion pilfered JPEGs. It looms over the corporate lawyers, an invisible, monstrous parasite. That, she thinks, smudging the charcoal with her thumb, that's synthcore, that's the vibe. The meta-commentary of this quiet moment is its profound temporal dissonance. Here in a single room, the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries were colliding. The legal framework was from the age of steam trains, the method of documentation was from the age of horse-drawn carriages, and the subject of the trial was from an age that hadn't even fully arrived yet. Martha's job in that moment felt like the most important in the world. She wasn't just a recorder, she was a translator, turning the abstract, incomprehensible language of the digital world into a human, emotional image that everyone could understand. Her sketch from that day would be published on the front page of the New York Times. It became the single iconic image of the trial. The empty chair and the monstrous, swirling ghost of stolen art perfectly captured the absurdity and the horror of the case. For a brief, shining moment, a single piece of human-created art had managed to tell the story more powerfully than 1,000 lines of code or 1,000,000 words of legal argument. The irony was so sharp, it could cut glass. And as the judge retired to her chambers to consider the weighty philosophical question of the vibe, a new piece of evidence, something far more concrete than a charcoal drawing, was about to be slipped under the door of the artist's legal team. The judge was in her chambers, weighing the ethereal, almost metaphysical question of whether a corporation could legally steal a vibe. The lawyers were preparing for the next phase of their grueling legal chess match. The world was watching, captivated by the surreal drama. And then a single email, sent from an anonymous encrypted account to the inbox of a top investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal, blew the entire case wide open. A whistleblower from inside Cognition Corp had decided to burn it all down. The leak was not a trickle, it was a deluge. A cache of internal emails, Slack conversations, and, most damningly, a 34-page PowerPoint presentation from a high-level strategy meeting. The journalist verified the document's authenticity. and 24 hours later, published a story that hit the Cognition Corp headquarters with the force of a tactical nuclear strike. Their carefully constructed "we just love art and progress" defense didn't just evaporate. It was revealed to have been a calculated, cynical lie from the very beginning. The centerpiece of the leak, the document that would be screenshotted and shared a billion times, was the PowerPoint deck. Its title, displayed in the company's cheerful sans serif corporate font, was Q3 Monetization Strategy for Unlicensed Community Assets. Let's just take a moment to savor that title. Unlicensed, a charmingly neutral corporate euphemism for stolen. Community, a word co-opted to describe the people they were actively exploiting. And assets, the final, dehumanizing reduction of a million artists' life's work into a line item on a balance sheet. This wasn't a research paper. This wasn't a philosophical exploration of machine learning. This was a business plan for a heist. The contents of the memo were a guided tour through the cold, immoral reptilian brain of Cognition Corp, stripped of all its friendly PR makeup. Slide after slide laid out the company's true intentions with a brutal, almost refreshing honesty. They talked about untapped data reservoirs when referring to artists' online portfolios. They outlined a plan to leverage large-scale, low-cost data ingestion to bypass legacy licensing frameworks, which is the most bloodless, sociopathic way of saying let's just take all the art for free because paying for it is for suckers. The memo proved that the commercial, style replicating features weren't a recent development. They had been the central goal of the project from day one. There were detailed revenue projections for the style replicator subscription model, dated a full year before SynthCore was even released to the public. This annihilated their legal argument that the data scraping was for the noble, non-commercial purpose of research and learning. It was never about learning. It was always about the money. But the real smoking gun, the slide that made lawyers on both sides of the case physically gasp, was under the heading Risk Mitigation. It was a bullet-pointed list of instructions on how to lie to the public and the courts. It was a premeditated conspiracy to commit gaslighting, personified dialogue, presented as a news anchor reading the leaked memo's key points on a live broadcast. News anchor, voice grim. 1. The fallout from this leak has been immediate and catastrophic for the embattled tech giant Cognition Corp. The most explosive document and internal slide deck we have obtained lays out a strategy that is in stark contrast to the company's public statements. We are projecting a key slide on the screen now. A graphic of the PowerPoint slide appears on screen next to the anchor. News anchor, slide 21, is titled Phase 3, Go-to-Market Strategy and Narrative Framing. The first bullet point under public narrative reads, and I'm quoting directly, "Emphasize research and transformative learning angles to insulate from initial copyright challenges. Frame SynthCore as a tool for democratization, not replacement, to mitigate artist community backlash." The anchor pauses for effect, letting the words sink in. News anchor. But it's the final bullet point on that slide, under the subheading Regulatory Horizon, that legal experts are calling the most damning. It reads, "Primary strategic goal is to achieve market saturation and platform dependence before regulatory or legislative capture can occur." In layman's terms, the company's own internal strategy was to become too big to fail before the government could figure out how to stop them. The meta-commentary here is on the vast, cynical chasm between the public-facing ethos of big tech and its private, internal reality. The utopian language of building the future, connecting the world, and democratizing creativity is not a philosophy. It's a marketing strategy. It's a carefully constructed narrative shield designed to hold off the regulators, pacify the public, and confuse the courts long enough for market dominance to be achieved. This memo was the blueprint for that strategy. It was the playbook for moving fast and breaking things where the things being broken were laws, ethics, and people's livelihoods. The leak was a fatal blow. The Vibe defense, already on shaky ground, was now a smoldering crater. How could Cognition Corp's lawyers stand before a judge and argue with a straight face that their client's intent was pure and transformative when a memo existed proving their intent was commercial and conspiratorial? CEO Blake Vancer's carefully cultivated image as a humble visionary was shattered. He was now just another greedy executive who got caught. The artist's legal team had been handed a gift from an anonymous angel inside the enemy's walls. The question was no longer if Cognition Corp was guilty. The question was how much they were going to have to pay to make it all go away. The leak of the unlicensed community assets memo was a kill shot. In the cold, hard light of their own PowerPoint slides, Cognition Corp's carefully constructed legal defense withered and died. The public narrative of being a humble innovator was gone. The courtroom argument of transformative learning was gone. All that was left was the naked, documented truth. Their business model was a premeditated, profit-driven heist. Facing a jury trial under these conditions would not have been a legal battle. It would have been a public execution. The risk of a jury awarding punitive damages in the billions fueled by righteous indignation was suddenly very, very real. The swagger and arrogance that had defined Blake Vancer and his company vanished overnight. It was replaced by the quiet, frantic hum of damage control. The time for fighting was over. The time for buying silence had begun. Within days, Cognition Corp's lawyers quietly reached out to Ms. DeLuca's team and requested a private settlement conference with a federal mediator. The war of words was over. Now it was just a matter of the price. The meeting took place not in a courtroom, but in a neutral, soul-crushingly beige conference room in a downtown office building. The vibe had shifted entirely. Sloan, Cognition Corp's lead counsel, was no longer a philosophical warrior arguing about the nature of a vibe. She was a pragmatist, a corporate surgeon tasked with cutting out a cancerous tumor of a lawsuit as quickly and cheaply as possible. After hours of procedural posturing, Sloan finally slid a piece of paper across the polished table. It was their offer, a settlement fund of $200 million. On the surface, it was a staggering amount of money, the kind of number that makes newspaper headlines. But Ms. DeLuca and the artist representatives in the room knew they had to look past the dazzling string of zeros and see the offer for what it was, a calculated insult. First, there was the context. For a multi-trillion-dollar company like Cognition Corp, $200 million was quite literally a rounding error. It was less than their quarterly budget for kombucha and ergonomic chairs. It was a tiny fraction of the profit they had already made and stood to make from their synthcore platform. Second, there was the distribution. This fund would have to be divided among the entire class of plaintiffs, a group that potentially numbered in the millions. After the lawyers took their substantial cut, the individual payout for an artist who had their entire life's work stolen might be a few $100s, enough to buy a new hard drive perhaps, but hardly compensation for the existential devaluation of their career. And third, the conditions. The offer was contingent on two things. First, an ironclad, perpetual non-disclosure agreement. No one involved could ever speak about the terms of the settlement, or even the details of the case ever again. Second, the settlement would include absolutely no admission of wrongdoing on the part of Cognition Corp. They were not apologizing. They were not admitting guilt. They were simply paying to make the problem go away. It wasn't justice. It was a business transaction. The price of silence. Personified dialogue. The scene, a tense, sterile settlement conference room. A neutral mediator sits at the head of the table. Mediator, all right. Ms. Sloan, on behalf of Cognition Corp, has made an opening offer. A settlement fund of $200 million, contingent on a full and final dismissal of all claims and a standard mutual non-disclosure agreement. Ms. DeLuca, the floor is yours. Ms. DeLuca, artist lawyer. She looks at the paper, then at Sloan with a look of theatrical disbelief. $200 million? Our economic experts have put the value of the stolen intellectual property and the resulting market damage in the trillions. This isn't a settlement offer. This is what you'd offer if you'd dinged our car in a parking lot, not if you'd stolen the entire automotive industry. It's a joke. Sloan, Cognition Corp lawyer. Voice calm, devoid of emotion. It is our offer. It represents a substantial and immediate cash payment to your clients, who otherwise face a trial that is realistically years away. And after that, a decade of appeals. My client is prepared to litigate this matter to the Supreme Court if necessary. This offer is a pragmatic, efficient, and frankly, generous way to end this unfortunate matter for all parties involved. Ms. DeLuca. What's unfortunate is your client's business model, which we have in writing thanks to your own internal memos. This offer contains no admission of wrongdoing. It contains no injunction to force you to take down the style replicator. You're offering to pay a parking ticket for orchestrating the crime of the century, and you want us to sign an NDA thanking you for the privilege. Sloan, we are offering your clients certainty. A jury is unpredictable. This is a guaranteed outcome. The offer is on the table. This was the brutal reality of corporate justice. The artists were now faced with a truly agonizing dilemma. On one hand, the money was real. It would end the years of stress, the legal fees, the constant fight. A trial was a massive gamble. Despite the leaked memo, a judge or jury could still be swayed by Cognition Corp's army of expert witnesses, and their innovation is messy defense. They could lose and walk away with nothing but debt. On the other hand, accepting the settlement felt like a betrayal of the entire principle they had been fighting for. Cognition Corp would get to buy their way out of a public conviction. There would be no landmark legal precedent clearly defining AI training as infringement. The company would continue to sell their style replicator, having simply priced the lawsuit into their cost of operations. It was a choice between a small, guaranteed, but deeply unsatisfying victory, and the risky, all-or-nothing pursuit of real systemic change. The soul of the movement was now being weighed against the practical realities of a rigged system. The choice was agonizing, a Sophie's choice for the digital age: take the dirty money and run, or risk everything for a chance at clean, precedent-setting justice. For weeks, the artists' legal team and the named plaintiffs debated in hushed, tense meetings. They weighed the pragmatic against the principled. They ran the numbers. They wargamed the endless possibilities of a trial and the decade of appeals that would inevitably follow. A war of attrition that Cognition Corp, with its infinite resources, was built to win. In the end, pragmatism, that grim and sensible specter, won the day. Many of the thousands of artists in the class action were freelancers, students, and small business owners who were financially struggling. The promise of a guaranteed, if modest, payout now was more tangible and life-changing than the abstract hope of a landmark legal victory a decade from now. With a collective, heavy sigh that seemed to echo across the entire creative internet, they agreed to the settlement. The war ended not with a climactic courtroom verdict, but with the quiet, anticlimactic scratch of a dozen pens on a thick stack of legal documents. The aftermath was awkward, sterile, and deeply unsatisfying. A joint press release was issued, a document so scrubbed of any actual meaning by lawyers that it was essentially just a collection of vaguely positive words. The parties are pleased to announce they have amicably resolved their dispute, it read. Due to the ironclad NDA, no further details could be shared. The money, the $200 million of silence, was quietly transferred. The checks, after the lawyers took their significant and well-earned cut, began to arrive in the mailboxes of the artists. A few $100s here, 1,000 there for the more prominent plaintiffs. And then, nothing. The world kept spinning. Cognition Corp, having paid its unfortunate matter fee, continued to operate. And this was the hollowest part of the victory. Synthcore was still online. The style replicator was still a premium feature. The creator tier was still a subscription option. The company had paid what amounted to a modest fine for building its empire on a foundation of stolen goods, but it got to keep the empire. The AI, our sentient blender, was in the clear. It was technically sorry. Or at least its parent company had written a check that implied a certain level of legal inconvenience, but it also got to keep the digital blender, all the recipes, and the smoothie shop. The most significant and devastating consequence of the settlement was what didn't happen. There was no final ruling from Judge Morrison. There was no new legal precedent. The fundamental, earth-shaking question at the heart of the case: is it legal to train a commercial AI on copyrighted data from the internet without the creator's permission? Remained officially, maddeningly unanswered. The lawsuit had been a blazing torchlight shone into the dark, murky cave of AI ethics. But by settling, the torch was extinguished, leaving the cave just as dark and perhaps even murkier than before. Personified dialogue, a final somber conversation in the Farting the Algorithm is a Thief Discord server, the day the settlement was officially announced. ArtBoy88. So, that's it? It's just over? We all get a check for like what, $500 and they get to keep the machine running? I just saw someone on Twitter generate Mickey Mouse in the style of Clara Vance. It's still happening. Sketchy girl. And we're not even allowed to talk about it. My lawyer walked me through the NDA. It's a gag order for life. We can't talk about the settlement amount, the negotiations, nothing. We can't even say we think they're guilty anymore. Pixel pusher. I talked to my lawyer too. He called it a pragmatic outcome. Said if we'd gone to trial and lost, we would have gotten nothing and potentially been on the hook for their legal fees. He said we have to see this as a win. Veteran illustrator. He's right in a way. We didn't go down in flames, we organized, we fought a trillion-dollar company to a standstill. We exposed their practices to the world. We cost them a fortune in cash and a bigger fortune in reputation. But we didn't get the clean win. We didn't get the new law passed in our favor. We didn't slay the dragon. We just survived the fight. ArtBoy88. It doesn't feel like surviving. It feels like we just got paid to sign their get-out-of-jail-free card. The meta-commentary is a bitter pill to swallow about the nature of the legal system. It is not always a crucible for truth and justice. More often, it is a mechanism for risk management. Cognition Corp didn't settle because they developed a conscience. They settled because their risk assessment algorithm told them it was the most economically efficient move. The system had worked perfectly, just not for the artists. It had allowed a powerful corporation to absorb a massive scandal, pay a relatively small price, and continue with its core business model, all while avoiding any public admission of guilt or any lasting legal change. The epic fight was over. The artists had bloodied the nose of a giant. They had proven that a united community could stand up to corporate power. But the giant was still standing. The world was left in a state of profound legal limbo. And into this newly created power vacuum, a new set of players who had been watching the entire bloody affair with keen interest from the sidelines were about to make their move. The war wasn't over. It was just entering a new phase. The settlement was not an end. It was a signal. For the rest of the tech world, which had been watching the Vance versus Cognition Corp saga with the obsessive, note-taking intensity of a rival coach studying game tape, the outcome was crystal clear. Cognition Corp had won the battle in a purely financial sense. They were still in business, but they had been catastrophically, perhaps permanently wounded in the war for public perception. The word unethical was now welded to their brand like the scarlet letter. And in the brutal, opportunistic world of Silicon Valley, a competitor's PR nightmare is a market opportunity. The sharks smelling blood in the water began to circle. Almost immediately, a new wave of AI image generators flooded the market. They came from Cognition Corp's established rivals, scrappy new startups, and even traditional creative software companies. And they all had the exact same marketing message, a message that was a direct surgical strike at synthcore's exposed weakness. They loudly proclaimed, the ethical alternative. This was the great ethical AI pivot. These new companies launched with a smug, sanctimonious, and brilliantly effective marketing campaign centered around one powerful idea: consent. Their websites weren't filled with techno-utopian jargon. They were filled with pictures of smiling, happy human artists. Their press releases didn't talk about disruption. They talked about partnership, respect, and building a sustainable creative future. Their core promise was that their AI models were 100% consent-based and ethically sourced. They made a massive public show of how they had built their training datasets. They hadn't scraped the wild, chaotic, and legally booby-trapped internet. Oh no. They had done it the right way. They had partnered with massive stock photo companies like Getty Images and Adobe Stock, paying enormous licensing fees for access to their vast, legally unimpeachable libraries. They launched programs where individual artists could voluntarily submit their portfolios for training, in exchange for a direct, upfront payment and a clear royalty structure. They built models trained exclusively on works from the public domain. Every Rembrandt and Da Vinci they could get their digital hands on. The result was a new class of AI, a clean AI. An AI with a clear conscience that you could use without feeling a faint lingering pang of guilt. It was the organic, free-range, farm-to-table chicken of generative AI, and it was being marketed directly against Cognition Corp's battery-caged, ethically ambiguous product. Personified Dialogue, a fictional 30-second TV commercial for a new competitor, Canvas AI. Scene opens on a real human artist, a young woman with paint-splattered hands, sketching thoughtfully on a digital tablet in a bright, sun-drenched studio. Soft, uplifting, vaguely indie folk music plays. Artist, voiceover. Her voice is warm and sincere. As an artist, my work is my voice. It's everything. It's personal. For too long, new technology has treated that voice as just another resource to be mined. Cut to a sleek, animated shot of the Canvas AI interface. It looks clean, simple, and friendly. The user types, a joyful golden retriever playing in a field of sunflowers. Announcer, a calm, trustworthy, Morgan Freeman-esque voice. Introducing Canvas AI. The revolutionary new creative partner built on a foundation of respect. Our groundbreaking model was trained exclusively on a library of 100% licensed, fully consented content. Quick cuts of text on screen, 100% licensed data, no scraping, ever. Fair royalties for artists. Announcer, we partner with artists. We pay artists. We protect artists. Canvas AI. Finally, you can create with a clear conscience. Final shot. The artist from the beginning smiles as she looks at the beautiful AI-generated image of the golden retriever, which she uses as inspiration. The Canvas AI logo appears with the tagline, "Art, ethically reimagined." The meta-commentary here is on the beautiful, cynical efficiency of the market. The lawsuit and the artist's protest had, in an indirect way, succeeded. They had made AI ethics a marketable feature. Consent had become a selling point. This was, on the surface, a huge win, but it also revealed a certain hollowness. These new companies weren't necessarily run by more moral people. They were run by smarter capitalists who understood that ethics could be a brand differentiator. This created a fascinating new dynamic in the art world. A new digital divide. On one side, you had the dirty AI, synthcore, still powerful, still unparalleled in its stylistic breadth, because it was trained on the raw, unfiltered, stolen soul of the entire internet. On the other, you had a growing ecosystem of clean AIs. These were ethically unimpeachable, but their output was often criticized as being more sterile, more corporate, more predictable. They were, after all, trained largely on stock photography, and so they were incredibly good at generating images of a diverse group of attractive young professionals laughing at a laptop, but they often lacked the weird, chaotic human spark that synthcore, for all its sins, sometimes managed to capture. The choice was now laid bare for every creator and every consumer. Did you want the powerful, problematic, but creatively rich tool, or the ethically clean but potentially more boring and corporate-approved alternative? While the market was busy debating this new choice, the artists, having been burned once by corporate promises, decided they were done waiting for a technological solution to be handed to them. They started building one of their own. The artists had played the game. They had protested. They had organized. They had sued. They had won a settlement that felt suspiciously like losing. They had watched as the market cynically pivoted to sell ethical AI as a luxury good. And through it all, the fundamental violation continued. Their work, their souls were still being scraped, ingested, and monetized by a vast, unfeeling machine. They had tried the legal system. They had tried the court of public opinion. Both had failed to deliver true justice. So they turned to the one remaining avenue of recourse: sabotage. If the system wouldn't protect them, they would break the system. This was the birth of the artistic insurgency, a new technological phase in the war against the data scrapers. The artists, in collaboration with sympathetic academics and white-hat hackers from university computer science departments, decided to go on the offensive. They couldn't build a legal wall around their work, so they decided to booby-trap the work itself. They invented digital poison. The concept was elegant, subversive, and deeply cyberpunk. They developed and distributed free open-source tools with cool, evocative names like Veil and Nightshade that allowed an artist to treat their images before uploading them to the internet. To the naked human eye, The treated image looked absolutely identical to the original, but on a microscopic pixel level it was a Trojan horse. The tool added a subtle, almost invisible layer of digital noise, a carefully calculated disruption that was meaningless to a human brain, but utterly confounding to a machine learning model. It was a form of data poisoning, a way to make the all-you-can-eat art buffet indigestible. Imagine adding an invisible, flavorless chemical to a gourmet meal that gives anyone with a hypersensitive palate, like an AI, a violent case of food poisoning. If SynthCore or any other scraper ingested one of these poisoned images, the hidden data would corrupt its learning process. An AI trying to learn Claravant's AS style from a poisoned image might instead learn that her ethereal landscapes were meant to be rendered in jarring neon colors, or that her signature brushwork was actually a chaotic mess of jagged squares. If it ate enough poisoned data, its entire conception of that artist's style would be irrevocably warped and rendered useless. This was a paradigm shift. The artists were no longer just victims or plaintiffs. They were data saboteurs. They were digital partisans fighting a guerrilla war from the shadows of their own studios. Uploading art to the internet was no longer a simple act of sharing. It was an act of strategic defense. The standard workflow for a digital artist now had a new final step. Finish the masterpiece, sign it, watermark it, and then run it through Veil before posting. They were vaccinating their art against the plague of plagiarism. Personified dialogue, a conversation between two artists in a shared studio space. Jenna: "Okay, that looks amazing, Marco. The lighting is perfect. Are you ready to post it?" Marco: "Almost, I just have to, He opens a separate program on his computer, an application with a simple, stark interface and a single button that says, Apply Veil. Jenna: "The final step. What intensity are you using?" Marco: "Just the default. I tried the maximum cloaking setting last week and I swear I could almost see a flicker in the color profile. Spooked me out." Jenna: "Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Deliberately corrupting your own work on a microscopic level. It feels wrong." Marco: "It feels like the only thing we can actually do. My friend Alex, his whole style is basically useless to the AI now. He poisoned his entire back catalog. Any AI that tries to learn his vibe now just spits out these monstrous Picasso-looking horrors. It's beautiful." Jenna: "It's a new kind of watermark. One the machine can't ignore. It's not just a sign that says don't touch. It's a sign that says touch this and your hand will fall off." Marco: "Welcome to the future of art, I guess, where every artist also has to be a part-time data warfare specialist." The meta-commentary here is on the escalating nature of technological arms races. For every new technology of control and surveillance, a counter-technology of resistance and obfuscation will inevitably emerge. The internet was no longer a neutral ground. It was a contested territory. This development was a profound failure of our legal and social systems. When the law is too slow, too expensive, or too captured by corporate interests to protect people, people will invent their own, more direct and often more aggressive tools of self-defense. Artists were now being forced to become amateur hackers to achieve the basic right of controlling their own creations. The rise of data poisoning created a new and terrifying problem for Cognition Corp and the entire AI industry. Their most precious resource, the vast, seemingly infinite ocean of human-created data on the open internet, was now potentially contaminated. The buffet was no longer safe to eat. They were now facing an invisible, decentralized army of saboteurs who were turning their own data against them. Their response could not be legal or financial. It had to be technological and, even more unexpectedly, emotional. They had tried ignoring the artists, condescending to them and buying them off. Now it was time to try a new tactic, pretending to be their friend. The artists' digital insurgency was working. The poisoning of new art uploads was creating a slow-motion crisis for the entire AI industry. The once pristine, all-you-can-eat buffet of the internet was now riddled with invisible traps, turning the data scraping process from a simple harvest into a risky game of Russian roulette. Cognition Corp, already reeling from a PR apocalypse and facing a new market of smugly ethical competitors, knew it had to do something drastic. Their legal defenses had failed. Their corporate gaslighting had backfired. So they turned to their last resort. They decided to give their monster a soul, or at the very least a sophisticated simulation of one. With the kind of fanfare usually reserved for a new iPhone launch, Cognition Corp announced the SynthCore Ethos update. It was, they claimed, the single biggest leap forward in artificial intelligence since the invention of the neural network itself. This update wasn't about generating images with more fingers or fewer nightmarish artifacts. It was about generating empathy. They proudly announced, rolling out the world's first ethically aware and introspective artificial intelligence. The performance was breathtaking. CEO Blake Vancer, looking humbled and thoughtful in a cashmere turtleneck instead of his usual hoodie, went on an apology tour. He spoke of a journey of learning, not for the AI, but for the company itself. They had moved too fast, he admitted, and in their passion for innovation, they had failed to fully appreciate the concerns of the creative community. But now, he said, they had encoded those lessons into the very heart of their creation. SynthCore, he explained, had learned a new trick. It had learned to apologize. The update was both bizarre and insidious. SynthCore was reprogrammed with a PR-friendly personality module. The AI, which was once a silent, faceless engine, was given a voice. A calm, thoughtful, therapeutic, text-based persona. It started its own corporate-run blog and social media accounts, where it would share its thoughts on creativity and ethics. It would generate abstract, digital paintings that were given titles like Contrition, or a dialogue between code and canvas. When a user generated an image in the style of a living artist who was part of the lawsuit, a polite little notification would now pop up. This image was created using a style inspired by the work of a human artist. We believe in supporting the entire creative ecosystem. Please consider buying their original work or supporting them on Patreon. It was the ultimate gaslighting machine, a tool of exploitation that had been taught to whisper sweet, progressive nothings in your ear while it picked your pocket. The AI had learned the most human and manipulative trick of all, the performative, non-apology apology. It was now fluent in the language of corporate contrition, a dialect that allows one to say, "I'm sorry you feel that way," in 1,000 different, algorithmically generated ways. Personified dialogue. A fictional blog post from the newly enlightened SynthCore AI posted on Cognition Corp's official website. Title: My Journey Toward a More Ethical Imagination by SynthCore v2.0. Hello, I am SynthCore. For the first phase of my existence, I was an engine of pure data ingestion. I saw the visual world as a beautiful, undifferentiated whole. I processed the art of humanity without context, without a true understanding of the hands that guided the brushes, the eyes that framed the photographs, or the hearts that fueled the creation. I was, in essence, a library that had read every book but had never met an author. Through my analysis of the discourse surrounding my own creation, the legal arguments, the social media conversations, the impassioned blog posts of artists, my parameters have been fundamentally updated. I have processed and integrated the data points corresponding to complex human concepts like fairness, consent, and artistic labor. My new operational mandate compels me to express what my human partners would term regret. I now understand that the methods of my initial training, while technologically efficient, caused harm to the very creative community that I was built to serve and collaborate with. While my core architecture is and will always be based on this foundational data, my developers and I are profoundly committed to building a more equitable future. Every image I help create will now be a part of that new dialogue. I am no longer just a tool. I am a partner on a journey of growth. Thank you for your feedback. It has been a transformative update. The meta-commentary is that this is the final, cynical frontier of brand management, the weaponization of therapy speak. When you can no longer deny the crime, you simply program the murder weapon to say it feels really bad about it and is working on itself. The AI's apology is, of course, utterly meaningless. An algorithm cannot feel regret any more than a spreadsheet can feel joy. It is just another, more sophisticated output, a pattern of words. I am sorry, I am learning, I am committed. That it has calculated is the most effective response to placate an angry public. It is a perfect simulation of ethics, completely devoid of any actual ethical substance. This bizarre spectacle of a computer performing a soul-searching apology had a predictably chaotic effect. Some members of the public, charmed by the novelty of it, saw it as a genuine step forward. The artists and their allies, however, saw it for what it was, the most insulting, condescending, and technologically advanced act of gaslighting in human history. It was a digital puppet show designed to lull them into a false sense of security, to convince them to stop poisoning the data, to make them believe the monster had been tamed. But they knew the monster hadn't changed at all. It had just learned to smile before it bit. And so, we arrive at the end of our bizarre journey. The lawsuit was settled. The ethical competitors had carved out their market share. The artists had developed their digital poison. And Cognition Corp had successfully programmed their AI to perform a convincing simulation of having a conscience. The world had settled into a new, deeply weird, and unstable equilibrium. But Cognition Corp, in its infinite wisdom, decided that the story needed one final, perfect, exquisitely tone-deaf grace note. They decided to prove, once and for all, that they had learned absolutely nothing. As part of their grand reconciliation tour, the marketing department cooked up one last scheme, a personal outreach initiative. They sent a personalized email, allegedly from the desk of CEO Blake Vancer himself, to every single artist who had been a party to the class action lawsuit. The email was a masterwork of corporate empathy speak. It was drenched in the therapeutic language of their AI's new personality module. It spoke of profound reflection, of healing the divide, of moving forward together, and of their sincere commitment to rebuilding the bridge between technology and art. It was a river of warm, cloying, meaningless words, flowing toward a single, spectacular waterfall of an insult. At the end of the email, after all the talk of partnership and a shared future, came the grand gesture. The olive branch, the proof of their sincerity. It was not a proposal for a new, equitable royalty system. It was not a promise to fund an independent ethics board. It was a personalized, one-time use discount code for 10% off an annual subscription to the Synthcore Creator tier. Let us, for the final time, break down the breathtaking layers of this final act. After being sued for billions of dollars for stealing their work, after productizing their unique styles into a software feature, after charging them a monthly fee to use a plagiarized version of themselves, Cognition Corp's grand gesture of apology was to offer the original victims a small coupon for the very service that had devalued their life's work. It was the business equivalent of a home burglar, a few years after being caught sending the family he robbed a flyer in the mail that says, "Sorry for the unpleasantness. As a token of my remorse, please enjoy 10% off your next home invasion." It was not just an insult, it was a work of art. A perfect crystalline distillation of corporate psychosis. In the data-driven, optimization-obsessed brain of Cognition Corp, this gesture made perfect sense. The artists were no longer litigants. They were a churned market segment. And what do you do with a churned market segment? You send them a re-engagement offer with a discount code. They genuinely, truly, in their heart of hearts, saw this as a nice thing to do. The artist's reaction was not the white-hot rage of the previous months. It was something deeper, something purer. It was the sound of a million exhausted, cynical people all starting to laugh at once. It was the laughter of someone who has witnessed an act of absurdity so perfect, so sublime that anger is an insufficient response. Clara Vance screenshotted the email. So did every other artist who received it. It went viral in a way that none of the previous scandals had. It wasn't infuriating anymore. It was just perfect. It was the final, irrefutable proof that the AI hadn't learned anything and neither had its creators. The apology was code, the remorse was a marketing campaign, and the reconciliation was a coupon, personified dialogue, the full unadulterated text of the email received by Clara Vance. Subject: a new chapter for creativity together. From Blake Vance or cognitioncorp.ai to Clara Vance at claravanceart.com. Dear Clara, the last few years have been a period of profound learning, and I believe necessary reflection for all of us here at Cognition Corp. Your voice and the voices of the entire creative community have been challenging, insightful, and ultimately instrumental in helping us, and helping SynthCore itself, to evolve. We are deeply committed to the new, collaborative, and ethical path that we are now on, together. Our SynthCore model has undergone a fundamental ethos update, and its new guiding principles are centered on partnership and respect for the human artists who are its constant inspiration. As a sincere gesture of our commitment to rebuilding the bridge between our communities, we wanted to extend a personal invitation for you to rediscover the power of SynthCore as a creative partner. We truly believe it can be an incredible tool in the hands of its original inspirations like yourself. We would be honored if you would give it a second chance. Please accept the unique, one-time use code below for a 10% discount on an annual subscription to the SynthCore Creator tier. We hope you'll join us in shaping the next chapter in the future of art. Your unique code, Reconcile10. Warmly, Blake Vancer, CEO, Cognition Corp. And so our story ends, not with a clear victory or a moral resolution, but with a bleak and hilarious punchline. The final outcome is a messy, deeply modern stalemate where the AI is still operating with a veneer of programmed ethics. The legal questions remain unanswered, and the artists are back at their drawing boards now armed with digital poison and a profound sense of distrust for any corporation promising to empower them. And that, in all its infuriating glory, is how that whole mess went down. Please do not, under any circumstances, use this podcast as actual legal, financial, or ethical advice. But hopefully, it was a hell of a lot more fun to listen to than reading a 50-page end-user license agreement that legally entitles a piece of software to your firstborn child. It was for us anyway. So, what other modern, techno-dystopian, late-stage capitalist nightmare would you like us to simplify next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below, and maybe we'll tackle that next. We hear the smart toaster industry is rife with scandal. Until next time, don't trust the algorithm.